Welcome. Am I on? Welcome to the work session for May 1st, 2024. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Cloud, we have a school board member, Mr. Jordan, who would like to join us electronically. Can you share what the procedure is, please?
Yes, Mr. Jordan's requested to participate remotely today. And in order to do that, I need to establish a couple of things on the record, and then I will turn it over to the clerk to get a motion and a second and to hold a roll call vote to allow him to participate electronically. So, Mr. Jordan, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes, thanks. Could you give us, could you identify with specificity the nature of the personal matter that requires you to participate remotely today?
I am in the city of Philadelphia doing some uh, professional, personal professional development.
All right, and you're also required to give a general description of where you are, but you've already done that. You're in the city of Philadelphia, and I think that's more than enough for the record. So I'm going to turn this over now to Ms. Tanner to call for a motion and a second, and then hold a roll call vote to permit you to participate in today's meeting.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to allow Rodney Jordan to join us today via Zoom?
I move that Rodney Jordan be able to join us via Zoom.
I second that motion.
Of course, there's no discussion. Basine?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Stone?
Aye.
And Buffalo?
Aye. Thank
We
you.
can carry on with the meeting.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Also, I want to note that Dr. Gabriel will not be joining us this evening. Okay. Ms. Tanner, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Basine?
Here.
Clanton?
Present.
Gabriel, Gabriel's not here. Jordan?
Here,
Martin?
Present.
Stone? Present. Buffalo?
Present. We're going to move on to 2.01, School Board Goals. Dr. Birdsong.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Buffalo, members of the board, members of the administration, and our community. In good standing, we always are prepared to present our data related to our school board goals, and this afternoon, Dr. Pohl is ready to do so. We will be covering goals number 1 and number 5 with updates. Dr. Pohl.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Buffalo, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. I am going to present, and these, as we usually do, we break them into interim measures. So I'm going to start with measure 1.1. As a reminder to the board and the community, goal 1 focuses on 100% of schools will be accredited by the 27-28 accreditation year, which is the test administration year of 26-27. The percentage of schools meeting accreditation requirements will increase from 57.1% during the accreditation year 22-23 to 65.8% during accreditation year 24-25. And interim measure 1.1 focuses on chronic absenteeism, and the percentage of students who are chronically absent will decrease from 20% during quarter 1 to 19% to quarter 1. And we're in quarter 3, so we're looking at 22.8 to 17% during quarter 3. And as the data show, the chronic absenteeism rate did grow by 0.4% from second to third quarter. However, I would like to note that it is still 3.3% lower than the same time last year. So we are seeing improvements, just not quite at the targeted rate that we were looking for. But we also know chronic absenteeism is pretty fluid throughout the year. As we go through. And the line graph shows a slight upward trend in the opposite direction of the target. It's kind of breaking away a little bit, but like I said, still lower than where we were last year. And you see that last year's, from third to fourth quarter, we had a nice little dip. So hopefully anticipating that again this year. So what's going well? The chronic absenteeism rate remains 3.3% lower than quarter 3 of last year. And all grades except for 10 and 11 showed improvements compared to quarter 1 of SY23. And all demographic groups showed improvements compared to quarter 1 of SY23 as well. Attendance data demonstrates a holistic effort to implement our MTSS, that's multi-tiered systems of support, division-wide, and this effort continues to include communications, root cause analysis, and professional development to provide proactive interventions to support students on time, daily attendance at school, ready to engage in learning. What is not going well with the data? Well, the rate increase over the last 2 quarters, it's currently 2.5% above the target that we had set for this year. And although the data remains fluid throughout the school year, as schools and graduation coaches work to recover the dropouts, they saw increases in the rate. So what are we going to do for next steps? So a more focused effort with pre-kindergarten and kindergarten to improve chronic absenteeism rates, because as we look at our rates by grade level, we do see kindergarten has a very high chronic absenteeism rate, as does our pre-kindergarten. Just ensuring the importance of attendance at the early ages to continue that trend as the students go through their education with us. And just note, though, pre-kindergarten does not count in our chronic absenteeism rates, but we do track them because we've grown our pre-K program substantially over the past 3 years, and we want to make sure they're coming to school every day. Continuing to implement the attendance and MTSS plans. Weekly communications with school principals to include attendance tips and strategies. Continuing the attendance challenges and campaigns. I believe we're on our last one right now, actually, that's gone through the whole year with that, which has been pretty exciting. The continued funding that you, as the board, support for graduation coaches and other staff members on overtime for the community, to go to the community to meet with students who are chronically absent or who have dropped out. Implementation of weekly school-level MTSS team meetings at all schools, and additional professional development for MTSS teams on when wraparound support is appropriate, as well as a full day of professional development for our school building administrators on June 10th, focused on MTSS and supports. That concludes the update for Measure 1.1 on chronic absenteeism.
Okay, school board members, you've heard the report. Is there any questions around this report? Ms. Stone.
I just had one that occurred to me that I don't see here, and if it's not something you're tracking, feel free to come back to me. Are there any one or several things that tend to be the major excuses for why they're not? What is causing the absenteeism?
I don't have that data point with me on what the causes are. Generally, though, we see since COVID, we see a lot more parents that will hold their children home when they're sick, because we really emphasized that during COVID to say, stay home, if you're sick. But now that we're beyond that, we're trying to say, no, you can come back, and here's when you can come back. But it is still, there's a lot of, my child's just ill, a lot more than there was pre-COVID.
Thank you.
Dr. Burson?
And I will add to that, Dr. Pohl and I had a discussion about our children working, and a lot of our families have working children now, especially with how the economy is at this time, and so a lot of our children have to work to help support their families, and so we're finding that because of that, and for whatever reason, it keeps them away from school, and so we certainly want to encourage them to work, because it will provide the skills that they need, especially if they plan to work directly after high school, but we certainly need them in school so they can graduate on time.
Correct.
Ms. Basine?
Before I go, because I do have several questions, if anyone else wants to.
Yeah, mine was kind of dovetailing on what was just
Go ahead,
spoken
Mr.
about there. So with Dr. Bertong, with the students working, I do believe the open campus was not only recovery, but also an opportunity for those students. Do we have the scalability, I guess, to identify, if we're seeing chronic absenteeism in the regular school setting, are we going out and offering that as another option?
I am so glad you mentioned that, because we really want to increase enrollment in our open campus program. If you look at the data today compared to last year, you will find that enrollment has decreased this year. So we are continuing to push that program because we've had good results from it. It's a viable program. It's a wonderful option to our children. We just need to continue to work to enroll them and get recommendations from our high school principals so that we can do so.
So just as a follow-up, if I can, so with the enrollment piece, especially and I missed that one on the accreditation, because I know attendance is now, I don't know if that's still going to be the case going forward, but if a student goes into open campus and they are attending open campus, how does that affect our attendance in the accreditation point? Does that credit back to the regular high school?
Absolutely, because Open Campus is just a program.
Got it.
So their data goes back to their home schools.
So we have a tool,
We do, a very good one.
a good one that's there that we have definitely seen over the years. Great success out of that one. So being able to identify, capture those students. And I guess there's also, yeah, so that's good. So it's out there. There's something there that we could
Correct.
wrap around in there, but appreciate it. Thanks.
Basine?
Thank you. So my questions, one of them was related to what my colleagues have just raised about, because you mentioned the root cause analysis as what's going well. So that tells me that you're capturing what some of the causes of chronic absenteeism are occurring in our schools. And I think this is a good conversation to have because as we're working to get the monitoring reports, where and how we want them, I think this is a great example of possibly including that information in the report, because I see next steps. We've talked about already a next step that's being offered about increasing enrollment at open campus, and what it would take from us, to support increasing enrollment there, increasing staffing, programming, whatever is necessary there. So I would really like to see that information included in the monitoring reports going forward, because I think that would be helpful for us to include. And the other thing I'd like to get a better understanding about is, from your standpoint, Dr. Birdsong and the administrative team, is do you feel that, because I see, other than quarter one, we're in the red, and so my question is back to, do you feel that chronic absenteeism is something that at least is 85% in your control, or the school division's control?
I don't know that I could lay a specific percentage on what control we have over it. I think the only control we have over it is the communication with the parents and ensuring that they're aware of every program that we offer the students, as well as now that the state allows us to recapture some time by going back and teaching standards they missed when they were absent. So that puts a little bit more into our locus of control, but I couldn't put a percentage on what amount of control we have on chronic absenteeism.
And that's something, as we continue to progress monitor, I think that's something that I think is really important for us as a board and as a governance team to really think about, because we want to have interim measures that are mostly within the school division's control. And so chronic absenteeism, I know there's so many external factors that go into it that aren't in our control. And despite all of the efforts and communication tools and things that you all are doing, I know it's focusing on the things that we can control, and through that root cause analysis, what are those things? I think it'd be helpful for us to have a better understanding of what that is, so that when we're talking about what's working well, not working well, next steps, we know exactly what direction we're going in. And so that's to my next question, is around, so given what we're seeing here, what do you expect? It's May. We have now 3 quarters of data. What do you expect, as this is still an indicator for accreditation, what are you expecting to see?
So, seeing the trend that we're still at a better rate than we were this time last year, I expect to see improvements at our schools. I also expect to see improvements because of the ability to recapture time at this point, and our principals are ardently supporting that and on top of that. And having students stay after, having students, some on Saturdays come as well, for recapturing time. And with all that in place, we'll continue to see the improvements and, you know, we're even better right now than we were at the end of last year, even though we saw a dip last year. So if we continue to see, if we can see a downward trend again fourth quarter with those in place, I think we'll be in a better spot than we were last year, and we'll see less schools at risk of not being accredited just because of chronic absenteeism.
Okay, and you meant, I think you started to touch on, one of the other questions I have was around the impact of the attendance recovery program. If you could speak to a little more, I noticed that that wasn't included in here in the report. If you could talk a little bit about the impact of that program on, you know, whether it's helping us address the chronic absenteeism in our schools or not, and what might be needed in order to make that program as successful as possible.
So any student that recapture time helps us with the chronic absenteeism. So we've seen success just in that. I don't have the exact number of hours we have, but I can let you know that every school has been recapturing time with students who have been chronically absent. And not only is it helping us with the chronic absenteeism rate, but it's helping us with them learning what they missed when they were absent from class. So right there, we're in a good spot with that. We've actually been pushing for that for a couple of years now for the state to allow us to do that with chronic absenteeism. As far as the needs, currently the state provided the all-in funding, and part of that all-in funding covers the recapturing time that we're using right now for chronic absenteeism. So I think it would come to, you know, not the SY25, but possibly the SY26 if we don't have those funds anymore, about what are we spending hourly to recapture those times, that we would be requesting that in the budget.
Okay. All right, thank you. So that's an example of something that is going
Correct.
well that we
Absolutely.
could include in the report to expand on that for our shared understanding around its impact. And what would you say are some of the main differences between the schools that have reduced their chronic absenteeism and those that have not? Like, are you seeing any particular trends or anything that we can, or any practices that are happening that we can model or replicate in other schools, or?
So actually at the last principals meeting, the principals came prepared to share what they were doing with recovering, so that we're already actually sharing and doing, sharing the ideas and concepts at the other schools. That's, you know, Dr. Kimsey and the executive directors drove that discussion, had principals volunteer to come and speak about what are they doing to recapture and how is it working. So we're actually already, you know, on top of sharing that and making sure best practices are happening across the division.
I think it'd be helpful for us to have an understanding of what's working and not working, and, you know, as well as part of the report.
I just
on this
wasn't,
particular
I
goal.
wasn't sure how deep we wanted to go with the data. You know, I was trying to keep it overarching about a division instead of the specifics about what's working, what's not working. You know, that may be still a little cloudy to me on these reports.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're practicing this, I think, and trying to figure out like what depth of information, but I think having the shared understanding of what's working well versus, you know, like what in your analysis are you finding is working and not working is important to us, because, you know, I already hear resources needed, potentially programming, all of that, you know, especially as we talk about open campus or any other type of programming that we might consider, you know, down the line. I think that would be important. And speaking of additional data, one thing, and I don't know if this is data that the district has, but this is also kind of tied into not just the chronic absenteeism, but the dropout rate, is what percentage of those that are chronically absent and who are at risk of, or that we're trying to recover from dropout, what percentage of them are reading below grade level? So that's something, like, you know, I would be interested to know what that is as we talk, you know, build on our literacy plan and, you know, looking forward years ahead of what we might want to have in place. So, because I know a lot of the research shows that a lot of, you know, there is a correlation between reading proficiency and dropouts and chronic absenteeism. So
I just want to be clear, is that another data point that the board's requesting to have this correlation between our dropouts and reading level?
Well, go ahead. You're going to say
I
something?
mean, I was just gonna, I think it would be interesting for us to have an understanding about what that looks like for Norfolk Public Schools.
I see pondering faces.
Yep,
Can we get that somewhere else, though, like in another time?
Yeah.
So I don't know that we need it.
Well, and I'm not saying as part of this
We do know
report,
it's part of
but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean, even though it's not part of this monitoring report, it's, I think, information that is helpful for us to have an understanding of what it looks like. So I'm not asking for it to be in this report, but I'm asking for a general understanding of what that looks like for Norfolk Public Schools.
Yeah, and we don't, I mean, nothing we report right now has a correlation of attendance to literacy, but I would not be surprised if we follow national trends.
Yeah.
I mean, it's same with all of our students who are chronically absent or dropping out. Generally, there's academic reasons for that as well.
I mean,
And effects for it, which is why we feel tracking and monitoring the chronic absenteeism dropout is important, because we know exactly what students we're looking for to recover, dropouts to get to open campus, and chronically absent students to recover time, and if needed, before they drop out, to make sure they go to off open campus, and we track that pretty closely at the school levels.
Yeah, and I bet we follow national trends, but I think it would still be important to understand the exactly how, are we moderately following it? Are we, on that spectrum, like where are we? Because I think that's still important to understand. So I'm just putting that out there. You can talk about it, and we could talk about it when the
Yeah.
full board is
Yeah.
present, but I
Definitely.
think that's a data point that would be interesting for us to know the full scope is.
but I'm trying.
Mr. Clanton,
Okay,
then
go.
Ms. Stone.
And I'm following you here, and I'm hearing what you're saying. Good data, good information, but then I ask myself this question: how will that shift my decision-making as a board member? How will that determine which way we're going to go? And that made me think about something you said before, Ms. Basine, on the report here. That might be because when I look at you say what are we going to do? Next steps.
Yeah.
Maybe another box under that one could be what we've been asking for and what the administration's given to us, and good governance is make recommendations. So if there's something immediately that you need the board to take a vote on or take action, that might be financial or whatever else down there, maybe that's something that's underneath there, a recommendation. So here then, at a work session, we can talk about it, and then when we get to a point where, we need to get to a board meeting, we can do that. But so when I'm saying all of that, it goes back to, I truly believe that the professionals in the room are looking at these data points and are looking at that information. But I feel like we could easily slip back into going back and asking for, which would be nice to have, data information. But that goes back to that iDashboard. Don't we still have that? Maybe it's
iDashboard's
located
still on
there.
there.
Yeah,
Does iDashboard have that as maybe a?
It's still not, so it's not correlating the specific data point of
I look at that
attendance.
regularly,
So-
yes. So
and maybe,
iDashboard is
in
available, but
iDashboard or something like that.
That piece of it is not part of, the correlation is not part of.
But
part
I
of
think
that.
all of us know, in all respect, that if students can't read, write, third grade
Absolutely.
level, school to prison pipeline, if they're not in school, they're not, I think all of that is just kind of given thing.
Right.
And so whether or not we're following that one, I think what the administration's given us in this report here is at the board level. And I think the only thing I would probably maybe, if need be, is there a recommendation? Is there a recommendation that the board needs to take action on that's coming from the administration that we could potentially add? That's why when I ask about open campus, okay, it might be we need to put some additional funding to that. Well, superintendent's already, given
and
us a
that's
budget.
exactly the point
But
of
we
that,
may,
right.
as we're looking at the trends throughout this year, saying, hey, we may need to shift some things in the budget to beef up this particular, we don't kick Rodney out. To just that. Or what my other question with that one was, truancy officers. Where are we at with truancy officers in the division? Because that might be where, I don't know if we've got it budgeted for, every school, because I know there was attendance
Yes.
but that might be a recommendation that comes in there. So I could definitely agree, as we're still going through this practicing, that maybe it's recommendations that the board take
Absolutely.
action on, in following with you. I mean, because I hear what you're saying,
And
and I'm with you on that.
Yeah, and you're getting to what would normally, like if there needs to be a shift in what we're doing that might require resources, policy, whatever that may be, that's what we expect to see in these reports, and the things that we're doing well, how do we enhance them, amplify them, replicate them, whatever that is necessary to do that. But we also need to have that shared understanding of what it is that is contributing to the data that we're seeing.
And just understand that when
so-
we look at the report, what are we going to do next steps? I see that as administration, and what the recommendations from administration is this is what we need from you to help us.
Yes.
If that would be the case. I'll shut up.
No, I just wanted to remind you, because we did have a conversation about truancy, and so I can't recall if it was the latest, not this budget, but the one before that. If you can recall, I recommended to the board that we reclassify the positions for attendance technicians. We did so, and we were able to fill all of those positions. In addition to that, I requested an additional enrollment coordinator for Norfolk Public Schools. The board supported that, and now we have that individual in place. So we have been asking for the things that we need.
So then it really goes, I'm sorry, I'm Stephen Stone, I've just got open one
Everyone
questions
gets
here.
their turn.
Is it one-to-one at each school, or are they still
Oh, no,
sharing?
no, we don't
That's-
have, yes.
Is that on the high school, middle school versus the elementary?
But they also get the support too.
Okay.
They go back and support, but it's primarily, the concern is at the secondary level, and that's why we specifically have them stationed there.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Stone?
I think it goes back to my first question, because we have so many data points on these students that I'm sure you guys are tracking, obviously tracking, and I think that just goes back to my question on what are the correlations of the students that we see absent, and we look at all those data points for those students, what seems to be the most common, what are the common denominators, what are the elasticities that are existing here, like what are we seeing common across the board, and just being able to see that a little bit here. I would be really hesitant to pick one data point, because we could very easily miss something important by trying to focus in on something that we think is the main factor, when it very well could be something else. And so while we may very well
not
know that's
suggesting
true.
that.
No, yeah.
I'm not
That,
suggesting.
yeah. And so that would, having some of those data points come out as you see as appropriate would be helpful, but as a prescriptive thing, I don't think we're at that point.
Okay, I have a question. Dr. Versal, Dr. Pohl, how many graduation coaches are assigned per high school?
Two.
Two.
Yes, and I did ask for that increase. It was
Okay,
one, so I
that's why I was-
asked to double.
Okay,
And the
good.
board did support that, and so we do have those in place.
Okay, good, because I was going to say that could be a heavy load for just one person, so I'm glad to hear that.
I see Ms.
Dr. Martin?
And we increased their contract from 10 months to 11 months, so we could have that summer support.
Okay.
I guess I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to say it, but I don't know if it's been already asked, but in a different way. What is the most convincing way, how do we convince these kids to come back? I mean, is there something,
I
a
could,
common strategy
if I
that,
had that specific strategy, I would be retired and speaking across the nation right now. I think it really varies. It varies by school, it varies by grade level. As Dr. Birdsong said, some students, it's work. Some students, they're not dropping out, but they might miss a few days because they have to pick up an extra shift. Some students, I could go on with a litany of what it is. In some students, it's just much easier to say to mom, dad, or grandma, grandpa, and say, I'm not feeling well. And they're like, well, you better stay home then. Than it was, just 5 years ago. It was, no, I don't care if you're sick, get up and go to school. That has changed in the households. And this, and I know you guys all know this. This isn't a Norfolk-centric.
right?
This is a national issue.
But we do offer so much for
Do.
our students that it's, there has to be something that they could connect with that would motivate them even
Right,
to
and we've
try to start that process to come back.
We've increased our club offerings. We've increased, the open campus offerings. We've increased now with the recovery hours time, the ability for students to be able to do that. So we are trying to hit everything that we possibly can to support our students
So
across
it's
the
almost
board.
like, don't be ashamed if you haven't been at school, we want you back.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks for the report, and I've appreciated listening to all the conversation. Just guess a couple of things or questions I may have. One, just listening to the board's conversation, I think part of what we, from a board perspective, may still be struggling with when it comes to our monitoring. We accepted this goal because that's something that the board deemed was important for us to monitor around school accreditation. But I think we know, if not, we should consider that school accreditation and dealing with chronic absenteeism isn't really about being student outcome focused as far as what students know and can be able to do. And I think that's what Ms. Basine was trying to speak to earlier. So, but we have the goal now, and we have the interim as far as chronic absenteeism. And so, as I was listening to the conversation around open campus and board actions, I guess I'm still trying to get some clarity around. Maybe I'll ask it this way. So, Dr. Pohl, in the conversations we've had around chronic absenteeism, we've talked about it at least in two ways in my mind. One is students can't get the teaching and learning that they need if they aren't in the classroom. And so the intent is to make sure the students are in the classroom so we can provide teaching and learning. And then there's the other piece of it, to what extent the chronic absenteeism rate impacts the formula around whether or not a school is accredited, where chronic absenteeism could be one indicator that gets factored into that formula. So to the extent of where we are now, if the chronic absenteeism rate that we're seeing in this quarter were to stay flat, that it ended up being our chronic absenteeism rate for this year, how would it potentially impact the goal of the number of schools that would be accredited based upon the target that we have for the end of this school year?
So we would be, a division average, we would be fare better than we did last year. School by school average, I don't have the data right in front of me, but I believe we're in a better spot now than we were last year with the lower average of where we are, Mr. Jordan. So we would have more schools that wouldn't be in trouble of being accredited with conditions because of chronic absenteeism, if we stayed flat with the data.
Yes, I think that would be helpful to know, because ultimately what we're trying to see as we have this right now is how the chronic absenteeism impacts the accreditation as far as the goal target is for this year. I don't want to go back down the path of open campus and some of that discussion, but in the context of it having been brought up, the open campus piece is largely affecting high school students, correct?
Correct.
And the conversation that was taking place around students that have to work, that was largely around students who are, 16 years or older as well?
Generally high school students, yes, sir.
Right. I mean, I just mean in terms of the working students.
Correct.
So I don't have a good sense of how large of that group is that you all have identified that are in those categories. But I do think if we're going to give that some attention, it would be good, at least from my perspective, for us still to be able to attach it back to the big picture, because the goal as we have now is around school accreditation. So if as a board, if we get focused on just the high school piece of it, then that's potentially 5 schools. Um, so I guess my comment to the board and to my board colleagues is, I think as we have these discussions, we have to be mindful of uh, recommendations, or the board considering recommendations that are all good recommendations and are positive in terms of supporting outcomes that we want for students generally. But to the extent that we can have the conversation and be able to tie it back to the particular goal and the particular interim goal that we're addressing, I think would be helpful. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Ms. Stone, then Ms. Basine.
I got additional thoughts, and I'm trying to figure out what order to go in. Okay, my original question was, we've discussed open campus. If work is a big part of it, is there a way, are we using any of our other programs, and this is for my own knowledge, like hire our grads or any of the certification pathways, or are there any work-study programs that we can filter them into that might help them be able to work and get paid and also finish school at the same time, or ways we can use the programs that already exist?
Many of our children who work are connected to a career and technical education program.
Okay.
So they're getting high school credit, and they're
Right.
getting paid for,
Okay, yeah.
compensated for their work. So a lot of our children are involved with work-based learning.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, that was my only question. If the absenteeism is connected
Yeah.
to work-related things, if there's a way to get them reconnected with
Yes.
those. So that's perfect. And then my, just to clarify what Mr. Jordan is asking, are you asking us as a board to, I'm not sure where to look to decide that I'm looking
It's
at him.
everywhere.
Just to be careful that we're not getting hyper-focused, or are you asking for additional details to break this down by grade level or by school so that we have a better idea of where the absenteeism rates are more impacted? I'm just want to make sure I understand what you're suggesting to us.
No, what I was just simply saying is that we not lose sight of the goal and the target. So, for example, if I don't know how many students are on open campus,
About
let's say that there's many.
approximately 62 to be
Okay.
exact.
Okay, so let's say we have 62, since we
Right.
do, 62 students in open campus at whatever level that they are. Let's say that somehow that increased to 200 students. I'm saying that from a board perspective, as we try to tie, if we go down the path of trying to tie particular programs or initiatives, and that becomes our discussion, I'm just saying that I think we ought to be able to tie that back to how does that move us closer to the goal. So if open campus, whatever the 62 students there in whatever place they are, if open campus went from 62 to 200, what does that mean in terms of addressing this goal of accreditation? So I'm not saying it's a bad discussion. I'm not saying it's a good discussion. I'm just simply saying that I think we have to be mindful that any particular program can come up, but we don't necessarily know unless the information is provided to us about the scope and size of it, such that it would have significant impact on the goal that we're trying to achieve. And so I just raised that in that context, because otherwise we could easily have discussions around one particular program, have that discussion in isolation of whether or not it drives us towards the goals and the progress that we're trying to monitor overall. Does that make sense?
I think so. If I have more questions, I'll I'll let you know.
Ms. Basine?
Okay.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to raise earlier may be related to what Mr. Jordan is saying, because through that root cause analysis, I think that's where that deeper understanding comes in about, if work is the issue, what is the scope of that? Like, how many children are impacted by that? For the elementary school kids, what is really driving the chronic absenteeism? By providing us with that information, what that root cause analysis shows, it would help inform whatever recommendations do come up, whether it's programmatic, policy, budgetary, whatever that is, I think it would help inform it. So, and you're saying it's going well, so it's informing something in the chronic absenteeism. But to expand on that, to say specifically what that is and what you're finding, what you're seeing, what's the scope, is what I think will be really helpful and important for us to know.
Mr. Clanton?
Short. Appreciate the comments on that. I do want to go back and just kind of highlight a couple things here. And I hear the various perspectives, but I want to add clarity, particularly about the open campus piece. If it is a tool that's being utilized by the administration, and I wanted to highlight that this was one particular tool and how was it being utilized, the whole purpose of open campus is to ensure that those students are recaptured and given an alternative environment so that they can graduate and complete their high school diploma. The other component of that, also when I look at this in this report that you've given us 7 different actions that you're taking. That doesn't mean that there aren't other things that are going on in the division, and these actions cover the entire school division from every grade level. So the administration has given us those items. I'm just highlighting one that was out there and one additional clarity. Also, my question that came back about another tool, which would be truancy. But in that, the real bigger thing for me, and I talk about it all the time, is that we honestly have to, at some point, change the way we do education, period, here in Norfolk Public Schools. And it goes back, and I keep hearing my nephew's voice in my head. He graduated last year early, but I remember him asking me, Uncle C, how do you make school fun again? That kids want to come here. Because another thing that I'm not saying go back and tie it, environment. How many kids are not coming here because they feel bullied or they don't feel safe? Or, there's a whole host of different things that are going on. And this is why when I talk about other models, and you've heard me talk about Hampton and some of the others, about academies, putting like-minded kids together, getting rid of these attendance boundaries, creating an environment where they support one another. I mean, the data's there that shows that it works. I think sometimes we kind of look like, it's all right to have an antique and you can refurbish it, but it's still an antique. And so until we change how we do things and do it in a bold way and make it exciting, it's a compelling case. It's changing, like you said. If you could figure out how to wave that magic wand and everybody be there, but honestly, my biggest compelling thing as a kid to go to school was my mom, because she, in a very nicely way, threatened us every day. If you embarrass me and don't go to school, everybody's been there. You got a mom or dad or somebody who was like that. It's not the case right now. We have an entire generation with Gen Alpha and Gen Z that are coming out there who are all about entertainment factor. They are on their phones. It's all about the now type of thing. And so to try to grab their attention and to get them into schools, we've got to do something different. We're not going to solve that today, but I think when we talk about this overall, and I think that this is what these monitoring reports are supposed to do, is to bring up conversation and to stir up conversation, and maybe something that is said in a board meeting, you all go back as the administration and identify and come back again with a recommendation when you're ready for the board to take action. So I think my thing still coming out of here, and I appreciate everything was said there, is I think the administration has given us some items here. I think that the discussion about open campus and other things, it does tie back, because if we deal with chronic absenteeism, kids are in school, they're learning, they're going to graduate, it goes back to the accreditation piece, because the state has said, and we cannot put blinders on and not think that the public as a whole isn't looking at accreditation. It's the truth. They look at whether or not they want to send their kids, they want to move to the city. We hear it time and time again. So we can't put blinders on and not address that and understand that when we look at things and we address certain things, that we can't hit everything, but guess what? We have to identify the things that will get to as many things as possible that will help rise the overall achievement level across the division. So that's my own piece with that one. I appreciate everybody what they said, but that was just my thought. But it did have a connection back when I brought that up.
Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, just want to kind of restate what I was trying to say. There are, and I think it may have been said a little bit earlier in the meeting, there are a multitude of programs, data points, initiatives, items that can be tracked back to accreditation. We know that. We know that as a whole. All the other goals that we have, all the things that are in the strategic plan, all those things can be attached back to ultimately school accreditation. The point I was trying to make is that we decided we were going to have some focus. We chose a goal. We asked the administration to provide us with what they felt were the most leverageable, influenceable interim goals or strategies that they could implement to try to help us reach the goal. So I'm appreciative of the fact that the report includes suggestions and recommendations such as open campus and pre-K. Where I'm differing, I think, with what I hear Mr. Clanton saying is those recommendations, those initiatives that the administration may bring back to us, absolutely. And whenever they deem it appropriate, there's a process for them to come back and say, we want to go in a particular direction in order to advance us towards meeting these goals and achieving other goals that may be outside of where the board decided to focus. What I was simply trying to say is if we pick something like open campus, for example, and the board chooses to drill down on that in our monitoring session, we may not be looking at the big picture enough to determine whether or not it would have or how it would have overall impact on the goal. So I don't want to be misunderstood that I'm trying to say that all the great things that Norfolk Public Schools offers aren't worthy of board discussion and aren't worthy of administration recommendation and potential board action. What I'm saying is that the purpose for us having the goals and the purpose for us doing the interims is so that we could have focus and have focus on leverage and have focus on what's most likely to bring us achievement towards our annual targets and over the 5 years that we have established these goals. And so that's the point that I was trying to get across. I don't know if I'm getting it across now, but ultimately, as we're doing progress monitoring in pursuit of achieving the goals, to me, it's important that the board stays focused on what our goal is, what the interims are that the superintendent has recommended, and then us being able to determine whether or not at this point of the year or at other points of the year, are we making progress towards it? And if we aren't making progress, if there's something that needs to be, if we need to have deviation, then yes, that's when we would like to hear or should hear from the administration that says, hey, there's a red flag here. Something we thought was working is not working the way we thought it was. We want to make some shifts. Or if they say to us, well, we feel like we're on track, we will be able to see whether or not we're on track as we continue to do our monitoring.
So you're telling us to hush and trust the administration to bring us the data that they think is important?
No, I'm not saying that.
Respectfully.
No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is I don't think we should hush. Actually, I think the opposite. I think the board needs to have more discussion, but I think we need to have discussion around whatever we're dealing with from a focus standpoint and try to avoid having our discussion around initiatives that the administration is implementing without us being able to tie it back to what we're monitoring. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Is that all the discussion for the first
Don't let us keep going.
Okay,
Let's
then
let him get
we're going to
this one.
move on. Dr. Pohl, to the next report, please.
All right. Moving on to measure 1.2, which is same goal, but this measures our dropout rates. And the percentage of students within the 23-24 graduating cohort to the dropout rate will decrease from 9% during quarter three, or from 12.9% during quarter three to 9% during quarter four, or three rather. You can see here, and it's really the same discussion we just had on chronic absenteeism, especially when we focus on open campus. The dropout rate is for our high schools with accreditation, and we are not meeting the targets as seen in the data. The dropout rate increased by 0.2% from the second to the third quarter, and it's 1.5% above the same time last year. So we've seen an increase from last year. What's going well is the attendance data is demonstrating that MTSS division-wide efforts are in place and starting to work, because we've seen more of a flat line there. And then both Booker T. Washington and Granby High School have improved their dropout rates in the third quarter. What's not going well for dropout rates, the one high school's in the yellow range, the other four in the red. And although this remains fluid throughout the school year, as the graduation coaches work to recover dropouts, all schools saw an increase in dropout rates except for Granby and Booker T. Next steps, again, continue the implementation of attendance and MTSS plans, weekly communications with school principals to include the attendance tips and strategies in recovering students. Funding to support the graduation coaches is still in the budget, as we talked about already. Implementation of the weekly school level MTSS meetings and the June 10th professional development has been scheduled to really dig into this year's data and how are we planning further for next year with more depth of the dive for each school to go into their own data. So that concludes just a brief overview of this data that you guys already have.
Okay, board members, you heard the report. Are there any questions? Ms. Basine?
Yes, so I would just like to reiterate, some of the same stuff that I said for the chronic absenteeism, about having an understanding of those things that are going well, like the MTSS plan, the implementation, how we know that's going well, and the root cause analysis. I think that's important, as stated previously, for chronic absenteeism. The other questions I have are around, so each high school currently has a GED program and teacher, is that?
We have a division-wide, so we have ISAPE at each school. All those positions aren't filled, but we have division-wide opportunity for it. So our students can, and we do have students who enroll in the GED program.
Okay. One thing that I've heard, through school visits and talking with graduation coaches is that even with the GED program being available, what would be helpful is a prep program to get our students prepared to take the GED. So that's something that I know I've heard, and I don't know if that's something you've heard as well.
Well, that's a connection to ISAPE. I mean,
That is the part of,
yeah,
that's a part of the program.
right.
To prep them for
Correct.
taking the GED.
Yeah,
That's
the
why they're in
ISAPE
the
is an
program.
instructional program. It's not just where they go and take the GED. There's an instructional program before they take the GED.
Okay. Well, I think there is a
Yeah, and throughout the community, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's just sharing feedback with you, what I've heard, and I think for some, I know literacy again is, comes up, like in some of these discussions, I hear that literacy is an issue, and we've already talked about that, for taking that GED. What is it that Booker T and Granby High School has done that has improved their dropout rates?
With both schools, it's just, the visiting of the students, the going into the community and just the ability to bring back some students. I don't think there's anything specific that other schools aren't doing. They've been fortunate to be able to have the students who come back or go to open campus and connect back with the division.
Okay.
And I don't know.
I was going to add, because I had the opportunity to participate in one of the sessions involving, I believe it was the school counselor, the graduation coaches, principals, actually making telephone calls to parents and calling them to say, hello, Carlos is not here today, and I know it upsets you when he's not at school. So, can you talk to us about why he was out 4 days last week? And then it's, oh, I wasn't aware Carlos was out 4 days last week. And then there's a conversation. And then, oh, he had a medical appointment. Well, we don't have documentation of that. And so building the relationships with our families, that makes all the difference in the world. Having someone reach out, actually talk to them about what's going on with their child, and then following through with the parent to ensure that they follow through. I know that's an effective strategy, and they are currently using that, and it seems to be working. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, but I think they're getting the results from that.
And and as an addition to Dr. Birdsong's comments, just going back to the MTSS work, that has been very focused this year from the division level to the school level to where the schools have to report when are they having MTSS meetings and what is the focus of the MTSS meeting, and trying to bring, where some schools used to have an attendance team, a dropout team, a grades team, a student success team, a discipline team, bringing all those together to look at the whole child. And that progress this year has grown and grown and grown at the school level. To where we're seeing those improvements, to where, again, like we talked about the last time I presented data, it's the marathon that we're in, right? It's something that we're building upon to be stronger and stronger. And that was a lot of work that we've partnered with some outside folks with as well. And again, Dr. Kimsey ran that team for us, or runs that team for us.
I just want to, I really love seeing the creativity with the the school challenges.
Been fun too.
And it looks like every time we see them, they're having so much fun and they're really engaged. I mean, of course, those are the students who are there. So it'd be, nice to somehow, it just is what we're saying. It's just nice to use these, celebrations as a way to attract students back to school too.
We're having a culminating event on Friday at PB Young Elementary School to celebrate, attendance and the good job that our schools have been doing in that area.
Awesome.
So we appreciate that feedback.
Ms. Basing?
Yeah, and so connecting it to the overarching goal. So, we talked about chronic absenteeism. This is also an indicator connected to our accreditation rate. Are we, just based on what we're seeing for the first 3 quarters, how is that going to impact our accreditation standing?
So with the rate right now, we're with being above where we were last year, it puts us a little bit more at risk because dropout and chronic absenteeism are each single rates where dropout specifically, if that's not made, it could make a school accredited with conditions even if they're green everywhere else. So that, that's why we really manage this pretty heavily, and why, in the past couple of years, Dr. Birdsong in the budget has asked for additional supports, and you guys have granted those additional supports because we've seen the trends and the tracking of where we've been, so.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Dr. Pohl, we can move on to 5.1 report.
Madam Chair, I had one
I'm
question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan.
Too late.
That's okay. Dr. Pohl, can you just remind me for the Q4 targets, do the Q4 targets equate to what we're expecting by the end of the year, or is that just for that Q4?
No, that's a good question, Mr. Jordan. These are cumulative targets. So these are cumulative rates, they're not by quarter rates.
Okay, so the 8.5% target is what we are trying to reach for the end of this school year.
that was the original target, yes, sir.
Okay. And so, so, so currently we are,
14.4.
yeah, 6% away from that, a little less, 5.9, a little less than that, a little
Yes,
less
sir.
than 6, if I can add correctly. Is there any, I know you mentioned in the report, or reference in the report, a couple of schools. What, what might be the strategy? I mean, what would you say is the biggest challenge, I guess might be a good word, for that has us where we are in terms of where we are at the end of the third quarter and where we're looking to be at the end of the year?
Mr. Jordan, the biggest challenge, I believe, is finding the students who have dropped out. If they've moved, finding them and making sure they've enrolled somewhere and getting that correct documentation, but really just finding them. And those that we do find, the challenge is, convincing them to come back and getting them to come back. But, as you guys know as a board, we can't just say, and I'll just pick on Mr. Clanton since Dr. Birdsong did, that Mr. Clanton moved to Ohio and put that in the record. We have to have the registration of the school in Ohio to put with the record. And sometimes just capturing that documentation, we could have, 50 children who've moved out of the division who have registered somewhere else, but we don't have that documentation, and that still counts against us. So a lot of that work is just tracking that documentation down, and that takes time. There are students who might be in this cohort who moved away 2 years ago that we're still trying to track that documentation. Some of our students who might have come from outside the United States might have moved back to their home country, and that makes it even more difficult. But that's why we ask for the additional staffing, so that they can make those calls and try to track down that documentation so that we can have what we need.
Last question related to that. Do you have any idea of the magnitude of the number of students that we're talking about are on the trying to find list? Is it 10? Is it 50? Is it 100? Do you have any sense of how large a number of students we may be talking about?
I have phoned a friend,
It's a little over 100 kids.
and it's,
So you have to understand that one student, okay.
yeah, I'm phoning a friend, Dr. Kimsey, who has that knowledge right
Okay.
in the top of her tongue, or tip of her tongue.
Mr. Jordan, I don't have the exact number. I can tell you it's around, 150 to 200 students. The challenge is, because of the size of the cohorts, one student, so for example, I look at the data every single week when it comes in. One student, depending on the size of the cohort, so like at Booker T. Washington High School, can make a 2 percentage point difference, just one student. And I want to also encourage the board. So we do have our Q4 target, but remember, we have an August graduation. And so our summer school effort is always huge and very focused on getting the kids across the stage, really making sure they get what they need intensively. And we even offer special tiny academies at each high school for select students that we're basically hand-holding them, picking them up for school, all of that to get them across that stage. So this number remains fluid until, the beginning of, yeah. So we won't know the final number for dropout rate until the fall.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, to you all's credit, you noted that with the include summer graduates asterisk from where we started. I was just trying to get a sense of what might be the total number of students. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kimsey.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, keep going before there's more questions, right?
Yes.
All right, so measure 5.1, if you recall, goal 5, I think this is the first time we've presented it. The goal 5 is focusing on the percentage of NPS graduates receiving advanced studies diplomas will meet or exceed the state average by the end of SY 26-27 or with the class of 27. And just as a data note, for 2023, the NPS average was 35.3% and the state average was 51.5%. So there are 3 interim measures here just because we broke them down by cohort, just to make the data more easily readable. So the first one is for cohort of 2027, to have 50% of the students successfully graduating with an advanced diploma by the end of 23-24, to be on track to graduate with that. So as the data show here, and this data is, trending in the right direction. Cohort 2027 data continue to be below the targets for quarter 3, but the students are trending towards the target and actually increasing at a faster rate than the target increase was. You'll notice the target increase was 2%, and here we increased by, about 3.3% from quarter 2 to quarter 3 data. And the data show that even though students are enrolled in necessary courses to meet the targets and have improved their grades in quarter 3, failing one or more of their required courses continues to move students off track for advanced diploma. So like we've talked about when this goal originally came in, this is really about success of enrollment in most of our cases, a success of passing the courses they're enrolled in. So what's going well? The students for cohort 2027 are enrolled in the courses that support reaching the targets by the end of their graduation cohort. Even though the improvement is small for this cohort of students on track for advanced diploma, the improvements due to their grades improving in third quarter. If students in the 2027 cohort were passing all the classes they're enrolled in, 87.1% of the students would be considered on track for an advanced diploma, which is pretty impressive. This is a decline from quarter 2 from 91.8%, but there are many factors that contribute, including changes in courses or transfers of students. We're a pretty mobile district in several aspects because of the military town. Relevant, meaningful world language professional development offerings in 23-24, which is leading to better instructional practices in classroom with the goal of higher student success rates, which means students would take the second and the third year of a language. That was a big part of our goal this year, and we focused on that more. And another piece of data here, the middle school course selection for 24-25 so far has yielded 2,313 requests for world language, compared to 2,204 students enrolled in a world language this school year, which is an increase of 5%. So we're seeing this class actually increase their enrollment in world languages, which we talked about earlier was for our younger students, that's a larger barrier because they have to have the opportunity to get 3 years of a language or 2 and 2. What's not going well? A couple things we've already kind of mentioned. They're not passing some of the required courses to receive that advanced studies diploma. And the data reflects the most failures right now are in math, then followed by English for cohort 2027 specifically. And then the teacher vacancies in world language classrooms, and again, the cohort's still below for the quarter 3 target due to failing grades. So some of the next steps specifically for this, and you'll see these are repeated a lot in the different cohorts as well, but offer the world language teachers more training on communication and teaching in the target language through summer professional development and through the half-day professional developments out throughout 24-25. Continue to provide relevant, meaningful world language PD offerings in 24-25 for effective instructional practice in classrooms. We're also working on creating new thematic unit curricula based on best practices, student interest and communication, and the level 1 curriculum is to be implemented during the 24-25 school year. Mr. Clanton, that brings back that, really making it more exciting for the students and more engaging. Also, looking at this long-term, new exploratory world languages curriculum was implemented in 23-24 school year. And conversations regarding diploma types begin as early as the 6th grade and continues as students progress through high school. So trying to bring introduction of world languages to students without the credit-bearing course, but just like, this is what it's about. This is what the culture is about, the language is about, to pique that interest. Also, the integration of Major Clarity, which is an academic and career platform for academic career planning, into all NPS elementary schools with 4th and 5th grade students. And then the revision of the 6th grade academic career planning document and restructuring, streamlining the ACP process for school counselors to make it more discussion-oriented with their students. So again, some of these will be repetitive, so I won't speak to them to every single one, but that's the cohort 2027 data piece.
Okay, board members, you have heard the report. Are there any questions? Ms. Basine?
Thank you for the report. So given that the goal for this is the percentage of NPS graduates receiving advanced studies diploma will meet or exceed the state average. So tying that back, tying the interims that we're reviewing right now back to that goal, can you speak to, so we have a greater percentage of students not on track to successfully complete the appropriate courses. So what do we know about the students that are on track and not on track? Like, are there like, any glaring characteristics of who they are? And I know you talked about the world languages. Is that primarily? I mean, if you could talk a little bit more about that, and then I'm going to roll into, I have questions about the, who the students are failing, one or more. I think you said one or more courses.
So I think as the data speaks to it, if all the students were passing all the courses, our number would be 87.1%. So it's at this point, it's not a matter of enrollment. To meet our goal, it's a matter of success in the classes and continuing the enrollment in the world language as we move on. Because what we'll see is even if a student in 9th grade takes a world language course, even sometimes if they're successful in it, they're like, I didn't care for that, I don't want to do it anymore. Convincing them as to why they need to do it. And the counselors, we started working with them before we even started doing course registrations to talk about the importance of continuing on with the language.
Okay. And what role do you think that our teacher vacancies, as you mentioned in the report, the teacher vacancies in our world language classrooms, what impact do you think that is having on students' success and also not only success but continued enrollment, where they don't transfer out, or because I think that was also mentioned that you have some kids who transfer classes. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Just with any class, and specifically with our languages, it's a cumulative, builds upon itself. And if you have a long-term sub for a first-year language and you choose to continue to go into year 2, you're going to face some struggles because you're missing that base. That's the worry, and that's with any of our vacancies. It's really, the students may not feel it as much this year as they'll feel it next year because of the lack of base of knowledge.
Right. So with that, so anticipating that, so this year, for instance, we know which classrooms have had a long-term sub. How can we, I guess, bridge the gap, so that next year that is a greater chance for success? Are there summer programs? Are there things that we can do to increase the likelihood of success and continued participation in those classes in anticipation? And I also see that, we have a good number of students who are, have interest in continued enrollment.
Right, so we're increasing our enrollment, which is a plus, right? That's important to note. We do not currently offer summer programs in language to support that. I think, overall, it's when we work with principals in scheduling, one of the things that we do ask them to do is when they look at their scheduling, and this goes for any student is to not, if they had a class or a teacher that was out for either the whole year or there was a portion of the year, to schedule them in a teacher's classroom that is there, a certified teacher's classroom, so that we don't have 2 years back to back. So it would be the same case with world language. If there was a student who had, a long-term sub all year, or for a portion of the year, when they take that level 2, or if it's level 3, that they're in a classroom that has a certified teacher in there, and to really hand look at those students.
Okay. And have you explored partnerships with our universities to help, I guess, fill that gap, for our world language? Is there any other subject area, because I also saw, I think, declines or increased failures in math too, if I'm not mistaken.
So, we've reached out to pretty much everybody we can. And in fact, we've used, I believe it was, Ms. Brady, was it Edmentum, that we've used to actually come in and do some video teaching with our students in the case where we've had long-term subs, to help supplement some of the instruction in the classrooms. Because as you're also aware, in some cases, there's only one language teacher in the building, so there, you can't really swap that classroom like we do with like a third grade teacher maybe from time to time. So we're trying to tap into any single thing that we can to help assist those students.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else has any questions before but
Is there anyone else?
Mr. Jordan has.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes, but I can wait. I'll wait for Ms.
No,
Basine to finish.
you can go.
Go
You
ahead.
can go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure want to make sure I'm understanding the data appropriately. And with the reference to if students in the 2027 cohort were passing all classes they are enrolled in, that sentence, can you remind me the vast number of students that are in the 2027 cohort are currently in what grade? Is that
They're
ninth or 10th grade?
They're in
Ninth
ninth grade, correct. So
Ninth grade.
this is our cohort that we're tracking to get to the finish line, Mr. Jordan.
Right. So, if I understand that sentence correctly, then that cohort of students are enrolled in courses that if they were all stayed on that track, then that cohort would show 87% of those students obtaining their advanced diploma. Is that how to read that?
Correct. So if they are
Okay.
successful and they continue to enroll in the courses needed, then 87.1 currently would be on track for advanced studies diploma when they graduate.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
And then, as you were mentioning, of challenges with successfully completing the math courses, can you speak a little bit more about, and maybe Ms. Basine was asking this earlier, can you describe are there groups of students that are struggling with the math success, or is it just kind of across the board?
I think, if we're talking demographically, it's the same, it's the same. So, we have some struggles with our special ed population. Demographically, I think it's matched pretty evenly across the board, but I didn't bring that depth of data to the meeting, Mr. Jordan, to know, but I can let you know that at the data meetings and at the school level, we're focused in on that level of data, and the principals know, and their specialists know, and the teachers know who those students are.
Okay, and then in light of that, are there any? I know you referenced some next step strategies. Can you give us a sense of whether it's next step strategies or underway strategies that target that group that is that you've identified are having the greatest challenges at the moment?
Sure. I think some of it comes back to the attendance recovery, because then we're focused specifically on the tutoring. We also have credit recovery in place for students. They can be online recovering credit throughout the year. We also focus unit to unit on what can they do to recover lost knowledge from the last unit, which is in place. And the teachers specifically work with the students who are struggling in their classrooms to do this. And I will say, when it comes to grades, when we get to that fourth quarter, you see that push and we see some increases in grades because teachers are working very, very hard and spending a lot of time with their students to get them to be successful.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I have one more. With that math course in ninth grade, which course is that is showing the greatest challenge?
The greatest challenge would be Algebra 1.
Algebra 1. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh, Ms. Basine?
Yeah, Mr. Jordan was asked what I was going to ask you to expand on those who's struggling the most. But as you mentioned, Algebra 1, what is it about Algebra 1 that I guess, is there something specific related to it? Like, is it having a certified teacher? Is it, what specifically is it about that?
The first part is, the certified teachers across the board.
Yeah.
Math teachers, we have a good amount of vacancies,
Right.
Especially at the secondary level, which is what we're focusing on here. The other part is, it varies by school and by teacher. But, one of the things that we've done is we've created unit assessments across the year that are digitally done through SchoolNet, where the teachers get itemized reports on standards where students are strong or weak, so they know where to go back. And then that, again, comes back to the attendance makeup, because where the students are weak is where they come back in and they focus on those specific standards. So it's, before we had data laid out like we have now at the classroom level, it was just come in and these are the standards I think we need to learn. But now it's, Ms. Basine, these are the standards you need. Ms. Buffalo, these are the standards you need. Dr. Birdsong, these are the standards you need. You may be good. But, we're focused, we get down to that level of by student. It's not just come and finish this worksheet that is going to practice of every standard towards a unit test. It's like you understand everything but these 3 items, so we're going to focus on these 3 items. And that's also where we bring in our tools like Edmentum and Zern Math that we just brought in as well for Tier 2 and Tier 3 support with our students who have the all-in tutoring and that budget that came in to help with that as well. That's where these come into focus. So it's not just we're going to wait to the end of the year and then try to see what we can do and try to get you into summer school. It's throughout the year. And then if you're still not successful, then our local, and you'll hear about this in a minute, well, maybe 10 minutes or something, but our local summer school program for high school is only recovery. Okay. If you want to do a initial credit bearing course, you do it through Virtual Virginia. So we expend all of our talent on recovering students right now to make sure that they stay on track, because that cohort on-time graduation is vital to us, let alone the advanced studies portion of it, to make sure that they stay on track for that on-time graduation.
Okay. And I'm glad you mentioned that, the summer program and that connection. I think, I do have one more question, but I think Dr. Birdsong.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Dr. Poole to also share the challenges with geometry too.
There are.
That seems to be a barrier. You want to explain why that's even probably more so challenging than Algebra 1?
Well, I think just the construct of geometry is a challenge for a lot of our students. And it struggles for me to say that because I loved teaching geometry. It was my favorite. I love theorems. I love postulates.
I wanted him to talk about
I loved every aspect of it, but it's hard.
Yes.
And it's one of the first courses where students see mathematically where it's not just plug it into a formula, but there's more conceptual understanding of it. So there is a challenge with geometry as well, but yeah.
Okay.
And the certified teacher part with geometry is vital.
Right.
Vital.
Okay. Thank you. So my last question is, so is there a difference, so you talk in the reports, so there's the attendance recovery plan, and then there's the in-course unit recovery options those are two different
Right.
things, right? Okay.
Now, I want to be clear, though, they could be connected. So if it's a student who's chronically absent, and we see their unit assessment data where they're weak, we're going to connect it to that data.
Okay.
But it might be a student who's not chronically absent, where we see the data with their unit assessment, and they're weak in like 3 or 4 standards. That's where we go back with them. They may be in school every day and just struggling, where the chronic absentee and attendance recovery connects, as we connect to the data where they need it. It's not where they just come in and play on a program for 3 hours and they got 3 hours back. It's come in and show us improvement on the standards for 3 hours to earn your time back.
Okay. And that's starting to take place now?
That's,
Yeah.
has,
Or
it's already, yeah,
it's
it's already in
been
place.
in place?
Mhm.
Okay,
It's already in place.
okay, thank you.
Once that rule changed, I think the minute it changed, Dr. Kimsey was on with the principals, Dr. Birdsong was on with Dr. Kimsey, and it was because we were ready for that. We had been wanting it. Yeah. Same exact day it came out, when it was passed to say we could do it, and the principals were all over that at all levels.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Dr. Poe, we can move on to. let me
We
check, Mr.
absolutely
Jordan,
can.
5.2.
So 5.2, I'm not going to belabor and go into the same depth. It's the same data points, but for cohort 2026, so our current 10th grade students. And here again, you can see we didn't quite make the target, but we are trending in the same direction. Our target had an increase of 4%. Our actual data had an increase of 2.5%. In here, let's see here, one of the data points I did put in here for you was that, 13.2% of cohort 2026 are not enrolled in a world language or a foreign language course. So already, the cohort, those students are not on track for advanced. So we're already at, 86.8% is the max that we can get with this cohort if they pass everything and continue to take their world languages. So what's going well? We have that percentage of students that are enrolled that support reaching the targets. Even though the improvement's small for this cohort, the improvement's due to their grades trending higher in third quarter. If students in the 2026 cohort were passing all classes enrolled in, 43.9% of them would be considered on track for an advanced diploma. And this is a decline from quarter 2 from 45.3. Again, it's because of either a student might have dropped a class or they moved. We had just enrollment changes across the division. But that's an important number to note, that this cohort already, if we see success for the rest of the years, they're really at a 43.9% rate right now of where they are. So that's where we're capping out with the courses that they're taking. However, that can change with some of the courses. The 13.2% with the world languages, it can't change because we can't make up that year, but other courses we can still make up as we go through. For high school selections, we did see an increase in enrollment in world languages by 8.6%. So that's at least promising, because again, we're really trying to just drive more enrollment of our world languages, and that would include our current freshmen in there as well. What's not going well? Students in the 2026 cohort are not passing some of their classes to achieve the advanced studies diploma by their graduation year. However, the data reflect grades are improving in a majority of the course content, so we are seeing improvement in grades across all course contents. Grades did decline in world language and physical education. Even though they didn't have the highest failure rates in those courses, the grades declined in those courses. Math and English grades improved, but continue to have the highest failure rate. So we saw improvements, but they have the highest rate. Again, the teacher vacancies and the year 3 of the world language. Although we saw the improvement, they're still 7.5% below the target. And the next steps are pretty similar to what we talked about with the PD. One of the things we added here with our high school students, specifically going in to convince them to stay in the world language courses, is really looking at a bilingual career presenters to speak on the merit of taking a world language and being fluent in a world language and the importance of that in our world today. And then again, we wanted to highlight the school's attendance recovery plans and the implementation of the in-course recovery units.
Dr. Martin?
We have such an international community presence here in Norfolk. I just can't even imagine not being able to get someone to come in and talk to our students. And I hear it all the time from World Affairs Council, from NATO families, that they want to be more a part of the school system, because they also, a lot of them have children in our schools as well.
Okay.
So, I think that's something that can really be facilitated, and I don't know. To miss it just would be terrible.
And if you have names, we're happy to pass them on to
Absolutely.
Dr.
Okay,
White.
yeah,
to
okay.
Absolutely.
hook them up with-
Have them sign up for volunteering and say that they want to present bilingually and the importance of world languages, and we will connect them.
Okay.
Anyone else? Ms. Basine?
I'm just curious why we're seeing an increase in failure in physical education.
That was my question.
I was just, if there's something different happening there, or.
Kids
I
are
don't-
busy on their phones. No, I didn't really mean that. but-
Oh,
I think it comes down to third quarter.
Okay.
They're going to be successful by the end of the year. I think it comes down to third quarter. I think, the third quarter in general is a tough quarter. There's a long stretch of school in there. It's just a tough quarter. They're prepping, they're getting ready for SOLs and their other courses, finishing up all their units of study, and coming into the home stretch. So it could be a myriad. I don't have the data on specifically what is causing it for the health and PE courses.
Okay, and I had asked a lot of my questions with 5.1, so.
Yeah, and this is pretty repetitive.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, I'm looking at the screen.
I have another
Yes, Dr. Martin?
about language. Duolingo's mission is to create free educational programs. And is that, I know we have other apps and things that we work with. Is that been on your radar to offer to students?
I don't know if we specifically offer Duolingo right now. I know we have looked
Something
into some
similar.
software. We do use some software packages, and like I said, we do lean on some of our digital partners for some additional instructional support. But I know in the past we've used some of those programs. Some of them, though, it's gives you the ability to speak the language, but not necessarily understand the depth of the language like a world language course does at the school level.
Well, Duolingo just added a new feature where they explain the answer. So if you get it wrong, or you want to understand why, so they are adding to it, and I'm not getting any money from Duolingo, but I've tried a lot of the apps, and it seems to be working. I like this one, but anyways, it doesn't have to be that, but because you want to meet them where they are, right? So if they're looking at their phones all the time playing games, this could be another game they could be playing that's actually helping move that mark.
And Mr. Newman, our senior coordinator for world languages and still ESL, because if anybody's listening that wants to be an ESL coordinator, we would love to have you.
Say that again, please.
Yeah, exactly. But Mr. Newman is pretty innovative, and so I'm sure he's looking at stuff. And like I said, that's why we also wanted to split that position, so that we have a world languages coordinator who can spend more time really being innovative around our world languages. But I appreciate that. I'll pass it on, Dr. Martin.
All right, Dr. Poe,
One more.
one more.
All right.
You can do it.
5.3, so this one is the most difficult one. This is our current juniors, cohort 2025. However, if you look at the data line, we're just below it, but we are growing faster than what the target rate was set. So the target rate was set to grow from 28 to 31%, which is 3%, and we grew 4.7%. From quarter two to quarter three. So that's a good piece of the data. If the students were passing all the classes they're enrolled in, we'd be at 34.3% on track, which would be better than our final target. So, that's our goal, is to keep these students on track as we move forward so that they can continue to meet that final target. What's not going well, what's not going well is students are not currently passing some of the required classes like we've heard on the other cohorts. And this 2025 cohort are not on track to meet the final target, which puts them on track for not meeting it by the graduation year. We're just really, really tight with this, which we knew going into this goal at that level already. The students are really, if you're not focused at going into ninth grade or even in the middle school, which we've changed that focus to really emphasize this option for students with academic and career planning. It's difficult to change at this time of their academic career. So the next steps, again, here with this one, it's really focused on the attendance recovery and the in-course unit recovery to do everything we can to make sure those students stay on track, as well as for their senior year to make sure they're taking that third year of world language and the other necessary courses to have that opportunity for advanced studies diploma.
Board members, you've heard the report. Are there any questions?
Mr. Jordan has his hand up.
Oh, Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Buffalo. Dr. Pohl, I appreciate the way this is broken out by grade level or cohort level. When you're looking at the challenges around math and English, or in this case, math and science, as you're describing challenges with successful completion of math, for example, in the 9th grade and 10th grade and 11th grade, as you now talk about the 11th grade, do you have any sense of to what extent those students in this cohort are still trying to get a satisfactory credit for like a 9th grade math versus is this saying that wherever they should be at the 11th grade, they're having challenges with that course that they should be in 11th grade, but they're having some challenges with achievement there?
So if I understand you correctly, Mr. Jordan, so these are the students that traditionally we'd say 11th grade, but they're cohort 2025, so they have another year until their cohort's supposed to graduate. If a student is still struggling with, let's say, Algebra 1, a 9th grade math course, we would already have them in the scope of not being able to reach that advanced studies diploma in our mindset, because they just, to get the math credits they need for it at this point. At this point, our focus is getting them to cross the line and not necessarily advanced studies. Because if we were pushing advanced studies, I'd be afraid of our dropout rate. Because it would probably be too much on those students who have struggled to that point in their high school career. So, at some point we have to have that focus on our overall graduation rates, and that's where it would be. If we had a student in this cohort that was behind because of math or because of English or one of their core content courses, we'd be focused on what can we do to make sure they have what they need to be successful to get across that stage. And to be life ready with a certification or job skills or whatever it may be, or to be ready to go into a community college setting in the future as well.
I'll ask this in the form of a question, but just for clarity with that, our overarching goal, our overall strategic goal is for every student to achieve academically and career, although it may not be on the advanced studies diploma track. Correct?
No, I'm going to choke.
Brought him to tears.
Thank you. Ms. Tanner's trying to put me out of my misery up here. Could you repeat the end of that, Mr. Jordan?
I just want, so when you were describing the students who, in response to my question, you were describing students that if they were in the 11th grade or in the appropriate cohort, in the cohort we're discussing now, but we're still trying to successfully complete a math course from 2 years prior, they wouldn't show up here because they're less likely to achieve the advanced diploma. So we would be focused on trying to get them across the stage. And you also mentioned trying to make sure they had a certification and be life ready. And I just wanted to make sure that um, that really those goals around having a credential and being life ready is something that we want for all students. I just want to
Oh, yeah.
see, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. We want them for all
Yeah.
students. I'm just, my point here was just that a student in the scenario that you presented would be in this data on the not on track. And it would be a student where we would be saying at this point would be less likely to get that advanced studies diploma.
No,
Not that,
I think I think I understood. I just didn't want it to in any way be misinterpreted that we had certain standards here and another
Yeah,
set of
absolutely
standards
not.
there. That's all.
Right.
And then I guess as a follow up to my earlier scenario, do you have any sense of, as we were speaking, as you were addressing the prior cohorts, and I'm just dealing with math right now since that's been consistent throughout, and we were describing how through additional tutoring, summer school, credit recovery, trying to get those students successfully to capture, I'm just going to use my language, the ninth grade cohort, so they would be ready for the 10th grade cohort. And I guess likewise with the 11th grade cohort, are we finding at all that students who were having challenges with the original achievement of the ninth grade math cohort, in any way, would you see any potential trend around once you're having some challenges with the algebra 1, for example, that might carry over into your future math work?
I think I understand what you're saying, Mr. Jordan. And yeah, I think in general terms, I don't have the specific data in front of me, but if a student has struggled in algebra 1, generally they're struggling in geometry, and then algebra 2 or whatever math they choose to take. So that and that's where we know, where we're looking at trend data and where teachers look at trend data to know where to support the students the most they can to be successful.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I want to ask the question in terms of that strategy around supporting those students. Is there anything you can share with us around what those strategies look like?
Sure. So again, I lean back on the attendance recovery time where we focus specifically on the standards for the students. I would lean on the software that we've implemented. That was a blessing in disguise when it came in, where we had to have software for online learning. And now our teachers have really worked and learned how to use that to use it for tier 2, tier 3 instructional practice. In middle schools, we still have the support blocks, where if a student struggled in math or English the year before, we put them in a support block to give them additional supports throughout the year instructionally for that specific subject. In elementary school, midway through the year this year, we changed the schedule around a little bit to give a specific 30-minute block of time for tutoring in math or English or both, if the student has that need to support the all-in measures from the VDOE at that point. So we also still have our safety net funds, Mr. Jordan, where we do after school and some Saturday school instructional support for our students. And then, the amount of data that we can share with teachers on unit assessments, on the, for grades 3 through 8 with the through assessments, with the STAR assessments, to align that to the needs of the student as well, so that we're not just shooting in the dark about, what does a student need, but we're specifically meeting that student's needs. And that's something also unique about some of the software we use with reading and math, Lexia and Admenum, is the teachers get regular reports on where the students are struggling or where they're excelling, so that they know really how to support the students better.
Ms.
Thank you
Stone?
very much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Just a comment for myself, and this is meant as more of an encouragement than it's not an implication. Just I'll give some personal background. I mean this not to brag on myself, but just to give some context. I graduated 4th in my class when I graduated, and when I ran into the principal of my own school, he didn't know my name. And sometimes we get so far into discussing the students that are not succeeding that we forget about the ones who are. And sometimes the remedy is in excellence and recognizing excellence, not just in recovering students. And absolutely, we should be trying to capture those students and help those students along because we want all students to succeed. But I get really squirrely when we talk about recovery programs and stuff like that because I worry that that we're taking away something from the students that have been doing what they were supposed to do all along and succeeding. And I've often been in the position where I've watched the people around me be celebrated for improving, where I had been doing that the entire time. And so I still do it for myself, and I still work hard for myself, and I think a lot of these students do, but sometimes just acknowledging the students that are doing well is actually one of the remedies to these things. And I just want to be sure that and I think sometimes we do this very well. We get in the superintendent's report, we hear all the fantastic things the students are doing. We have a lot of fantastic things that are opportunities and awards, and we definitely have those out there. I just want it to be on the radar because I've been in that position, and it hurts me when I see students dealing with that as well.
And I appreciate that, Ms. Stone, and I think one of the things that having the data that we have at our fingertips helps with is to differentiate. We emphasize at the elementary, middle, and high school levels about small group instruction so that we can formulate groups where we might have some groups that need remediation, but what about the groups that need to be pushed harder, that are that are doing well and that understand the concepts? What can we do to stretch them further? So that's a part of what we do with our professional development as well, to make sure that we do that and then to celebrate those successes. We talk a lot about celebrating the successes, every success along the way. Absolutely. I appreciate that.
It.
All right, with no more questions, we're going to move on to 2.02, MPS Summer Program Offerings for 2024.
So again, Chair Buffalo, it's the Dr. Pohl Show tonight. Our Academic Affairs Division is responsible for our summer school programs, and we are very excited about our offerings. I think we continue to anticipate high enrollment in our summer programs. We're very proud of the fact that we can offer our programs free of charge to our parents. And so Dr. Pohl is certainly ready to provide some more details about what we planned for summer 2024.
That was a beautiful setup. Thank you, Dr. Birdsong.
I tried.
I appreciate it. So good afternoon again, everybody. I'm here to share the overview of summer programs. And wait, there's more policy after this, so we're good. So the Summer Stars program, which we renamed a couple years ago, Successful Thinkers Are Ready Students. There will be several opportunities for content-specific learning as well as enrichment programming to meet the needs of all of our students. In an effort to continuing offering as many programs as close to home as possible, this year there will be elementary programming in 17 of our sites. The sites with multiple schools will be hosted at the school that's in bold font on the screen. So students who are zoned from Sewell's Point and Camp Allen Elementary Schools will attend Summer Stars programming at Taylor Elementary, just to give you an example of how this slide is laid out. Programming for the pre-K to grade 5 students include the Early Childhood Special Education Program, a 4-year-old summer literacy camp for all of our pre-K students preparing to transition to kindergarten, and that is really fun. Literally tents and campfires, and literacy is the focus, and it is a really cool little program. Summer Stars, formerly called Basic Skills Programming, behavior and social support, skills support program, as well as a cross-categorical program for our students with disabilities, and within the extended school year eligibility status. Of course, Camp Einstein, which is still one of our most popular elective programs, getting ready for pre-algebra 6 for rising 6th graders, so our current 5th graders. Summer Arts Academy, the Green STEM Experience out at Camp Young, and our English Learner Newcomer Program are all opportunities for our elementary school students. For middle school, they'll be attending classes at the 6 sites listed on this slide. And just as a note for the board and the public, students that attend citywide programs that include ADL, AOIS, Kent, and Crossroads will attend the school within their zoned sites for transportation purposes and just sheer numbers. It works out easier that way. Our middle school students will have Summer Stars, cross-categorical programming, getting ready for pre-algebra and algebra, junior university, health and PE, summer arts, green STEM experience, and the middle school English learner Newcomb as a part of their opportunities. And with our high school, as was successfully offered the last couple of years now, our in-person summer school program will be a hybrid program with students attending in person 2 days a week, live online the other Tuesdays a week. That was popular for our students and our teachers. It really helps with our staffing, and Mr. Fraley really appreciates it because it helps with transportation because it cuts down the number of buses for high schools in half. So the Norview High School will host our summer programs with Granby and Maury in person Monday and Tuesday, and Norview, Booker T, and Lake Taylor in person on Wednesday and Thursday of each week. Our high school students will have Summer Stars program, which will house students who are unsuccessful in a course during the regular school year. Any student who wishes to take a course for initial course credit, as we discussed earlier, will do so through Virtual Virginia options. And there will also be virtual credit recovery options for students with teacher assistance provided daily. And as we mentioned earlier, we actually have little mini sites at each of our high schools to try to grab our students in whichever way we can, as well as open campus. And you'll see ISAPE on the next slide as well. We also have the 2 programs for students with disabilities who qualify for ESY, and a postgraduate career development and cross-categorical programs. There's AP Summer Academy, so our students who are really stepping up, and you know, one of my goals is that dual enrollment in AP to really prepare them well for their AP studies. So there's a summer academy for our students there. There's the Credential Boot Camp, work-based learning, ISAPE, as I mentioned earlier, which is a virtual program with in-person supports if they need them. And then we'll run our open campus again at Norfolk Technical Center for this summer. We also have, as with last year, we're partnered with United Way to offer the extended learning for Chesterfield, PB Young, Ruffner, and Southside STEM through the LEAP program. And then for students at Coleman Place, Ingleside, Richard Bowling, and Suburban Park, the 21st Century Learning Grants will provide additional learning activity for our students there in those schools. Here are enrollment trends for the past 6 years, and as with last summer, all the programs are free to NPS students, as Dr. Birdsong said earlier. And applications for the variety of offerings are online right now and have gone out through our social media, through our all calls and email as well to our families at home. And text messages, correct. Yeah, you guys are getting, in fact, I got one while I was in the meeting.
I was like, yes.
I think Dr. White set me up for that one. And as Dr. Birdsong said, we hope to see the same, if not more, students than what we had last year. We had just under 5,600 students, and this is inclusive across all of our programs, which is wonderful. We love how full our summer programs are, and that is, as you guys well know, that's funded through our ESSER programs, ESSER funding rather for that. I did want to share with you summer 2023 data. We had mentioned this, but never had an opportunity to come back to it. So one of the things that we looked at was our vertical scaled scores. And I've talked to you ad nauseum about that, but I do for the community just want to say, when a student takes an SOL test from grade 3 through 8, they're not just assigned an SOL score at the end of the year, which, you know, we're used to that, 600 is the max you can get. Vertical scale scores go from like 800 to 2,200, I don't know the exact range, but they track a student from 3rd grade through 8th grade in English and in math. So we're able to use that vertical scale score from the spring to the fall to see if a student progressed, fell back, stayed the same, on where they are. And we call this in education a lot summer slide. You'll hear that mostly with reading, but summer slide in their learning is what we refer to that as a long time. So as noted earlier in the year when we talked about summer school, with our reading, it was the same. So 60% of the grade 3 through 7 students enrolled in summer school stayed the same or improved from their spring to fall reading SOL vertical scale scores. So when you're looking at 33% of our students fell a little behind in reading. And the rate was the same for students who didn't attend summer school. And I want to be very clear about this data. The data, these are matched sets. So as Dr. Birdsong said last meeting or 2 meetings ago, we have good statisticians in Norfolk, and one of them came through, and we looked at the same student scoring groups that attended summer school and found the same student scoring groups that did not attend summer school. Because even though our goal is for every student who was unsuccessful on an SOL test or in a course to get to summer school, we know we don't capture all of them. So the data sets were similar. So this shows us that in reading, we didn't see the dynamic change that we wanted to see with the students who attended our summer program. So that causes us to look into this summer, and where I said like the lit camp, and we're expanding that, and different things that we're doing at the elementary level to really help with the summer slide. Now in mathematics, we did see it, and I did mention that earlier, but here are the hard numbers. 62% of the students enrolled stayed the same or did better on their vertical scaled score, and they're similar group students, only 55%. So if you went to summer school, you had a better chance of staying the same or doing better on your math vertical scale score. These are from grades 3 through 7, remember. So we did see improvements in math with the summer slide. Another thing just to mention with the reading, and I'd like to say this publicly too, every elementary school, all 17 elementary school sites that have summer school, we're opening the libraries so students can come in for free and open reading throughout the summer as well. So that we're just trying to expand that. And in the summer, we also try to really advertise what our Norfolk Public Libraries do as well to support our students and with the programming they have in place too. So the math I was really excited about. The reading, I'm not upset, but I'm not excited about, right? We stayed level. We didn't see the summer slide, and who knows what those 67% that went to summer school, if they wouldn't have gone, if, how those numbers would have worked out. But this is the piece of data that we've really been, that I promised that we'd start tracking. And so we've started tracking it. We have it for last year. We'll do it again this year to see where we're seeing success and not. And that's the overview for the programs this summer and the little bit of data from last summer.
All right.
Hearing no questions, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, board members, you've heard the presentation. Is there any questions? I'll just make a comment. It would be interesting for me to know what was different for the students in math last summer, extra time.
Yeah, it really, instruction was instruction. And, some students come in for just math and some students come in for just reading. So it's not a split math and reading.
Gotcha.
It's just we saw a higher success rate with our math program.
Ms. Basine?
First, I want to say thank you for that, providing us with that data, because, that's something I've been interested in seeing. And given what you've found, so I have a couple questions, and just for clarity, so can you, sometimes I need to hear things again. Can you talk about the vertical scaled score again and the difference between that and the
SOL score.
SOL score?
Yeah, sure. So the actual SOL score a student gets on their test is the success rate for that exact year.
Right.
But a vertical scale score tells us how they do over time.
Okay.
So their vertical scale score, let's say if a student got and I'm just shooting in the dark on this one, Ms. Basine, but just as an example, if a student has a 1,500 vertical scale score, they might be doing great if they're in 4th grade, but if they're in 8th grade, they may not be doing great because it's of the range of where that falls. So if you refer back to, I think the academic state of the schools presentation, one of the early slides on that, I have an explanation of vertical scale scores, and it talks about this stepwise, and let me go the stepwise that students go up the chart as they go grade level. The expectation is the vertical scale score follows them up, where just a pass rate does not.
Right.
So the pass rate tells us the success at that moment in time. Vertical scale score tells us the success over time.
Okay. So that's what was used to, right, okay. And so, and I'm glad I had a question about whether these were matched sets, so I appreciate that. My other question, so as you talked about, we've seen this increased enrollment, over the last few years, and largely, we've been able to do a lot with the ESSER because of the ESSER funding. And so we're going to be using some of the, I guess, remainder of some of the ESSER funding toward this summer's programming.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And then, so seeing that, now that we're also going to be monitoring this type of data, like, the impact of summer school on, the school year. What are you anticipating going forward? Because obviously that funding is, you know, not going to be there. So what kind of adjustments do you foresee?
Dr. Birdsong and I talked about this a little bit earlier. You know, this coming up, so the summer of '25 is the first summer where we won't have ESSER funding.
Right.
Some of that will depend on where the state goes with the all-in fundings and what we're able to do with that or not do with that. Some of the all-in tutoring can be on summertime, so we could look at that kind of funding. But the bigger thing is the state funding we get for that, whether it be all-in or for the summer school funding that we get from the state, is for remediation purposes. Where we also, you know, want our students in is our programs, not the ESY programs, those are funded federally, but our Camp Einstein, our Camp Young, our Junior University, the summer arts programs, you know, we want to continue that. Our students in high school who want to have initial courses, you know, to get ahead of where they are. Right now, we fund those. So those are the conversations where years past, those have been funded through parents. You know, and looking at how do we do that, and making sure that we have an equitable representation of our students. So those are conversations we'll be having going into budget season, you know, to see, you know, where do we fall and what are our needs. You know, that's, you know, one of those things we talked about when we talked about the ESSER funding cliff, I believe it was called.
Yeah,
That was one
that's
of
why
the
I'm
things that we
asking.
talked about,
Right.
was where would we go with summer school? Because we know we want to continue aspects of it, and there are some that we just likely won't be able to continue.
Okay. Because I think that would be interesting going forward to know, like, what, you know,
Correct.
based on this summer's data, like, what
Correct.
will be on the,
And we'll be digging into, you know, internally, like grade level specific, you know, where do we see the most need and why was the most need for it,
Yeah.
as we move forward with summer school requests.
okay. And I have one more question about dual enrollment. So can you explain how would or how does dual enrollment work over this summer?
We don't have, there's none.
There isn't any,
There's none.
okay.
Yeah. Dual enrollment is only during the school year.
It's only during the school year. So if a student,
So a student can choose to enroll, you know, some of our students could choose to enroll to take a course at TCC over the summer.
yeah, okay, so that's,
And that could count like if they're moving towards an associate's or something else, or if they just want the college credit.
Yeah.
However, the dual enrollment aspect are during the year courses. And I'll use this for a plug for our students, and we've sent this information out as well. Again, TCC is offering, students can take, I think this summer though, it's actually up to 12 credit hours for
right,
free.
yeah, the LEAP
And
program,
they no laptop this year, they get a $500 supplement. And I know this because my daughter's taking 6 credit hours and getting the $500 supplement for it.
Okay.
And my son did it when he graduated as well. So if you guys know any seniors, or if anybody listening knows seniors graduating this year, contact TCC. It is the LEAP program
the
that they
LEAP
have.
program, right,
Correct.
okay, okay,
It's FREE. Actually, you get paid for it.
yep,
Yes.
yep. And so that, yes, so, okay,
Yeah, but back to your question, our students, like a rising senior, maybe who took dual enrollment as a junior, who's already enrolled in TCC, they could take a course on their own if they wanted to, that would go towards their college transcript. It just wouldn't count as a dual enrollment course.
yeah. And one thing to kind of put a pin in as we consider, I think I know there are students that take classes over the summer to get ahead. And as you think about what's equitable and what's not, I know at the high school level, and I know that this is a bigger topic, but students that take, who are able, have the resources to take classes over the summer and that count towards their ranking, you know, how, I guess, for us as a board to think about, you know, are there policies or things that we need to consider that if it's not an equitable opportunity, should that count toward ranking? Because there are students that take classes to boost their GPA, and,
I think-
you
and I
know,
think-
and that benefits students and parents who can pay for it. And so.
And that's why the equitable part was in the conversation
Right.
about what we offer through Virtual Virginia.
Yeah.
And I think that's a whole nother huge conversation.
Exactly. So that's why I said put a pin in it, but for this, but it is a bigger conversation that I would like us to look at because it happens a lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Mr. Clanton?
Thank you, and Ms. Basine actually answered one of my questions, which was about the funding opportunities down there. Though I do think there is definitely in our conversation with the city, when we think about just parks and recs and other things for student activities during the summer, that this could be one of those things because our students are engaged in somewhere else. The other thing that I didn't hear, and I might have been because I stepped out for a second, there are other wraparound things that we're providing, like transportation, we're doing meals in the summer. What are some of those? Did you highlight any of those that are also happening?
Not in direct correspondence with the summer programs, but we offer meals during the summer. We do
Okay.
offer transportation. And then, just the programs that we offer, like the Arts Academy. It's not all focused on math and social studies and English and science. It's much broader than that.
Got it. All right. Just want to make sure that you know about the other things. There's a free program
Free.
for graduating seniors.
All right, well, I see no more hands. Dr. Pohl, you can move on to policy.
All right, so please rest assured, I'm not going to pull all 42 policies up and read them out loud to you guys.
No, we went through them.
Good evening now, Madam Chair, Ms. Buffalo, members of the board, Dr. Birdsong. This afternoon, there are several policies on the agenda for review. Please note, 8 of them have no changes. They're just up for review to meet the 5-year requirement. And I've listed them on the policy review sheet for you guys as well. There is one regulation being changed. It's been uploaded for your information that matches a policy change as well. And a total of 33 policy with updates. Of the 33, there are just a few that I'd like to bring highlight to and bring your attention to. Policy EDC, authorized use of school-owned facilities and materials, is recommended to be deleted because it's now in duplication with policy KG. So that's why it's being deleted. And these are all but one policy are all VSBA driven recommendations. As you guys know, we follow their recommendations very closely. Policy GCDA is the one that's not a VSBA recommendation. This is the effective criminal conviction or founded complaint of child abuse or neglect. We're recommending that it be changed to a Z policy due to the added language of employees needing to report that charge or investigation to their immediate supervisor. Right now, that is not the case, but Human Resources has requested this because our school leaders have also requested that be in policy so that we can also put that in our procedures and our Human Resources manual. So that's why that's being added. This is one of the rare occasions where the policy review committee's agreeing to create a Z policy where we're trying to go away from Z policies on that. Policy IKB, homework's being recommended for deletion because it's not required by law. Oh, do you want me, I'm sorry.
Can we pause there real quick? So, because I did have a question about GCDA.
Okay.
So is that okay, or do you want to go through the whole?
I'm fine either way.
Okay,
Is
go
that
ahead.
okay? Okay. So it was requested by Human Resources to add that language. Can you expand on, I guess, what the,
Currently, the policy states the reporting policy doesn't include the direct supervisor. So it could be where someone was arrested, they didn't report it, and they're not showing up at school, they haven't, and the principal is the face of that school. So them having a knowledge of something going on with that faculty member or staff member is what's important and why why it was changed in the policy to support that. And that actually went through our school board attorneys for the language on that.
okay, all right, thank you.
In the policy.
And I think it had been noted as a procedure in our Human Resources handbook, but I don't think it was in policy.
Correct. Thank you for that. IKB, homework's being recommended for deletion because it's not required by law. There's no required homework policy by law. We do have homework outlined in our grading book as well. Ms. Basine?
Okay, yes, so with this deletion for homework, this has been a hot topic. So do did you all in the policy committee think about some unintended consequences as a result of deleting this policy? Because it's one that we spent a lot of time on and went back and forth with the administration, and even when the regulations put, like the time limits, it really, we spent a lot of time developing that policy and the regulations to go along with it. So with the deletion of the policy, the regulations also will go away.
Yeah, so one of the discussion
So-
points we had on that was ensuring that that goes into the grading handbook and requirements, so that it's not disappearing. There's still the expectation of what's to be followed so that we're not over inundating students with homework.
Okay.
But it, instead of falling, since it's not a legal requirement, instead of falling in the policy, that it's going to fall in the grading handbook.
In the grading handbook, okay.
But yeah, it's not going to, this doesn't mean there's no longer homework. I just want to make sure everybody heard that.
Oh, no,
But
and I was
there's-
thinking more the opposite. I was thinking more the opposite.
Can you tell my
that
son
They're
that?
inundated.
without having
Correct.
those outlined,
Right.
could it then result back into, over inundating our students with
Correct.
homework is what I was.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
concerned about.
And we had the same concerns,
Yeah.
Ms. Basine,
Okay.
academically. Policy IKFAZ, locally awarded verified credit for the standard diploma. We're recommending to make that a non-Z policy and follow the VSBA recommended format. This would eliminate all the language around the requirements for the locally awarded verified credit and just state that we follow the laws, policies, and regulations that the Virginia Code and VDOE have already outlined. So basically, our policy is very detailed on what's required of that, and all we need to say is we follow what we're supposed to be following on that. So that's why that changed there. INDC, Religion in Schools, actually adds information that allows divisions to offer an elective comparative religion class in grades 9 through 12 that focuses on the basic tenets, history, and religious observations and rites of the world religions. Policy KLB, Public Complaints about Learning Resources, adds language about procedures for handling the challenge materials. We carry those procedures in a regulation, and that was the KLB regulation, was the regulation change that was uploaded for just the knowledge of the board on how those procedures are to go. And those were the updates I just wanted to highlight to make sure everybody was aware of, especially our community.
Mrs. Moore Buffalo?
Yes, Ms. You go ahead. Mhm.
So, and I think you mentioned INDC, I think you highlighted that quickly, the religion in schools. So, I guess I was wondering, where do clubs and, do we need to specify clubs in this policy? Or did you guys talk about that already? Because I know we can have clubs as long as they're driven by students, I think is what the
Driven by
legal-
students
legal,
and open to equal opportunity for clubs. This one specifically, though, the only change to this policy was around that school divisions are allowed, if they choose to do so, to add a specific religion course. Right now, there are units of study in religion and world history, and that's the only place where it lives, but this says that we could have a course if we wanted to, so that's the only change that's being,
So this is about having the course?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I have a couple questions about policies that weren't highlighted.
Have you gone through your list?
yeah, that's all I wanted to highlight, but
Okay.
if there are other
Well,
questions,
you go ahead.
absolutely.
Okay. So I'm just going to put this little plug in. So the two lactation support policies, I'm for not having, it says up until one year. And I'm wondering why there's a cap on up to 1 year.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when I reviewed the policies that Dr. Birdsong, when we reviewed them in PRC, I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah.
If the board requests, I'm happy to scratch up to
Yeah.
1 year.
We're happy to support that.
Yeah, I would advocate scratching that.
Yeah.
And
Scratching up to
can you just give me the
It's-
policy
they're
letters?
not putting a cap on,
Yeah.
up to when an individual if they choose to
Continue
nurse
breastfeeding.
their
Yeah.
child, whether, and that goes for the student and the employee policy.
Right.
That we shouldn't put a cap on the upper limit, because it says up to 1 year.
Correct.
Okay, so then let me play devil advocate on the other side then, just to make sure that we have,
No.
so there's a person.
No,
Sorry.
well, I was gonna say, no.
I'm just saying, no, I'm stepping like, but what I'm saying is, does a mother at 5 years old on a child or 6 or 7, I don't know, I mean.
It's a personal
It's a personal
decision.
choice. Okay.
No
Choose to
decision.
do
Then I
it,
will leave it
then-
alone, so, okay.
You're brave.
I just asked,
I'll put
this
them
is
in.
informational purposes only, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yes.
If it's the desire of the board,
Do I
I'm
hear-
happy.
Yeah, I'm
Do I
fine
hear
with
agreement
Dr.
with
Pohl,
that?
I don't want any more eyes at me, I'm good, scratch.
Okay, okay.
So the 1 year is in the VSBA model.
So this
So
becomes
we
Z.
would put a Z there.
Correct.
Andy just looked at the statute. It looks like that's a minimum, so there's no problem with Norfolk doing something different than what other divisions do.
Thank you, Mr. Cloud, I appreciate that.
And I'm not
Yeah.
sure that that slight
It's
change requires a
JHCL.
Z, but,
HCL.
It will affect a
Yeah,
small number of
probably.
people, but enough people that will find it effective, that will appreciate
yeah,
it.
but I mean, changing that piece, I don't know, is a Z.
It caught my eyes as well, Ms.
Yeah,
Basine, and
okay.
enough that where I spoke with Dr. Birdsong about it too, and both of us were wondering why it was there, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, that
Okay, good.
works.
We're in
and
agreement.
what I'll do is, before the upload for consent agenda for the May business meeting, I'll make sure that change was made on there.
Okay, all right, great. And then,
Before we move on, I just want to make sure that we're agreed upon that we want to scratch the 1 year and take the recommendation from the administration on what that should look like.
Yes,
And
an
we're gonna have
unlimited
Mr. Jordan
time
to put
period.
his-
Okay, unlimited
Just
time.
period
Okay, I just want to make
versus-
sure we're all in
Thumbs up.
agreement.
He's
He
okay.
got his thumbs up,
Yeah.
okay. All right, Ms.
All right.
Basine, you can move on.
all right. Let me see, okay, it's at the lactation support. So policy JFCF, drugs in school. I know it's, I've got to pull it up. I think the language is, does this include, so it says the drug and violence prevention plan. Okay, it says it may require, let me try to get it up. Oh, my goodness. Let me pull that specific. So is that the drug education program that is required if a student, if there is a drug offense, that they're required to participate in this drug education program? Is that the same thing that we're talking about here?
Where are you in the policy, Ms. Basine? I'm sorry.
Number 2, prevention and intervention
Yeah,
within
prevention.
JFCF. Yeah.
Right,
City Schools Division's Drug and Violence Prevention Plan.
yeah. I'm trying to.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, my
Oh, it's
internet
E,
had
not
knocked me off.
Evaluation for drug.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that hasn't changed, that if a student's in possession of or under the influence at school or in a school-sponsored activity, if it's recommended and with the consent of the student's parents, to participate in a treatment program, that's been in policy.
Okay, but that's the treatment program. I'm talking about just receiving drug education.
Like through health and
So
physical education.
there's content and curriculum in that in health and PE.
Right.
In the health courses.
Right, and I understand that, but I'm talking about, and you've probably heard me ask this I mean, I've asked about this in our student support review, is that every child, I'm talking about the children that are, that have had an offense. So before they're given, their number of days of suspension or the consequence that they are required to participate in a drug education program. And I don't know, I see Ms. Hamlin here in the room. I don't want to put her on the spot, but it's different from the treatment program.
Correct.
And I guess maybe that's a point of clarification I need to have, that it is different, right?
You're talking like a substance abuse intervention program.
Yes.
Where what I hear you saying is a student who is being disciplined because of this in school, that a requirement of that be they participate in an
Yes.
intervention program.
Correct.
I don't believe we have anything like that in place right now.
I don't think we have it in policy, but we do practice that. We do
Yeah, that's
practice
what- yeah,
that, but it's not in policy.
Right.
And that's, okay, so thank you for that, because that's what I was trying to get an understanding of. So if that is something that we're practicing and it's not in policy, and that's something that we as a board think is, and administration think is really important, which obviously, since it's a practice currently, that's something the administration believes in and is doing, that I would like to see that in policy, if that is,
So I think
Or I'd
we
like to
would
hear your
support
thoughts
that,
about
but I don't
that.
know if we could make parents, that
And
would be the
well,
piece.
My worry about putting that in policy is if we put all of our practices in policy, then our policy manual would be all over the place. The policy, you know what I mean? And that's why we've been trying to stay away from the Z policies, because that would make this a Z policy to
Well,
say if
right.
we did that, since we already have it in practice. I'm not sure. I'd have to work with the city attorneys on that to see where it would fall.
yeah, and
Could.
I support that, because you don't want to be,
And
Right,
then we would have to definitely pay for it if we
If I
made it
may.
mandatory.
correct.
Am I misreading this? Because
And
the first
all of
line of
that.
B says, any student who violates this policy shall participate in the prevention and intervention activities identified by Norfolk City School Division Drug and Violence Prevention Plan. So isn't that what we're talking about right now?
well, that's
So
what
that is
I'm
the
getting
policy?
clear, that's what I'm trying to get clarity on.
So this-
Is that the same thing as what?
I think they're getting, I think we're speaking about two different things. So you're talking about the first part of it, and we're getting into the second paragraph there where it says, if recommended, blah, 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 to participate in a treatment program. So there's two different things in this
Right,
policy, a
and that's-
prevention plan and a treatment
That's what
program.
I'm trying to
And I
get
think we're
clarity on.
having two overlapping conversations across. the
No, I think they understand what I'm asking now, because, yeah, I was trying to distinguish, there's the treatment program and then the intervention plan, which is what we've talked about, as a board in our sessions where we've had, these offenses, but I appreciate, I hear what you're saying, and I agree, like, you don't want to have everything in the policy, because
Right.
our practices could change around that. But it is, I guess my point, what I'm trying to get an understanding of is that it is somewhere, like in a regulation or procedural manual, that is currently a requirement. Just to make sure that we are being consistent with every student who falls in that, finds themselves with that incident behavioral code, that we're doing the same thing for every child in that, that falls in that category, that they get the drug intervention program.
And I would have to research or rely on Dr. Birdsong or Dr. Cataldo
Okay,
for that, to get a better understanding and handle of that.
okay.
Because I
Yeah,
do
and we've
think
kind
there
of
are two
talked about it a
different
little bit.
issues here.
Correct.
Yeah, there's
They're
two different issues,
yeah.
and I just want to be sure I'm understanding the different issues.
So with that, Ms. Basine, could we ask if the administration is going back on
Take
that?
it
And can we
back.
define what's happening in each one of those so we have a better understanding?
Yeah, that would help,
Yeah,
that would help
me
me, because I do, and I think we all agree that that's an important piece of, an important practice first.
Well, I know we're doing part one, like, who violates this policy shall participate in the,
Yeah.
well, yeah,
That's the
so we're doing that. The second part, requiring the evaluation, I know we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So that would be something, and this says may, it doesn't
Yeah,
say
it says-
shall,
Right.
so that needs to be a discussion.
Right. What's
Right.
the whole thing with shall, Jack?
Shall, you will do it. May, you may or may
Well, the
not do
state-
it.
I know, but the state
Yeah.
and code is trying to get away.
Yeah.
Yeah, to undergo evaluation. I don't know legally, yes, I think we need to take it to
And I
the
think it
city
comes back to
attorneys,
your
because I
point.
don't know if we can
We'd have to fund that.
legally make a
Yeah.
parent have their child evaluated.
Right.
Maybe that's why they have May, but I don't know. I'm not the expert.
Yeah,
We'll
that's why I
research that
think,
further.
Yeah, I
yeah,
think we
thought
need to
that's-
evaluate it.
I can
So-
say off the top of my head, I'd have to look at that as well.
Oh,
Oh,
Mr. Clown.
as far as this goes, JFCF though, why don't we pass the VSBA changes on May 15th, but take the issue that Ms. Bazin's raising to the policy committee with the possibility of either amending this later to make it a Z policy, or maybe consider creating our own policy to address that. That wouldn't be a VSBA at all. Of course, if we do that, we have to then remember that it's on us to be sure that that policy is kept up to date, because that becomes a problem when we have policies that are not sponsored by the VSBA at all, because they don't tell us if the law regarding that policy has changed.
Right. Or even a regulation on it.
Yeah,
We did a policy
superintendent's
regulation, then
That might be better, because then the
That's-
superintendent can
exactly.
pass
I'd
it,
be-
inform the
So I agree, Mr.
and the board
Putz.
won't have to act
I would be
unless they have an
comfortable
issue.
with that, yeah.
All right,
I
so
think
we'll
that-
research a regulation
Okay.
around that, but we'll move forward with this policy so we have those changes in place. Okay, that works.
It's good for everyone? You're writing, okay. Mr. Clanton,
I'm good.
you're good?
All right, and then, and I know this is again something to consider with policy JFCJ, written notification of violation in alternative education programs. And I don't know where this fits in, but one of the things that we have talked about is seeing evidence of restorative practices being used, and it seems like because the 1 and 2, the conditions, I guess, in this case, that have to be met, pulling this policy up.
It is,
Yeah.
thank you, Ms. Tanner, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so. I don't know, I guess I'm raising the question for the board, is that we talk a lot about having restorative practices in place, and it's like, how do we ensure or promote, encourage that those practices are happening? Not only for students who are in the alternative education program, but those that find themselves with disciplinary action, in the regular schoolhouse, is ensuring that there is a restorative practice that's engaged in first before this long-term, as long as they're meeting these, specific conditions, that. And that might be something for you all as a policy committee to go back to. I'm not necessarily saying change it here, but I've been trying to figure out a place to bring that issue up of how do we ensure that there's a restorative practice in place to
And I think,
support taking disciplinary action.
I think that would probably, if it was the board's will to have that in policy, I don't know that this would be the policy where that
Right,
would
that's
fit.
why, but I could see that taking place here as well, but in a different, in the discipline policy as well.
Well, this one is more about, I think, if a pupil's already in alternative education and they do something that either it's an offense or violation of board policy, but it was committed without the willful intent to violate the policies, or did not endanger the health or safety of individuals, that we are still letting the parents know that happened.
I get it.
Which is
yeah.
where, so this is not where the student did something willfully, while they're in alternative education. This is, they did something that broke policy, and we need to make sure parents are aware so they can help correct that behavior.
This is just strictly about the notification to
Correct.
parents. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. I guess so I understand that, but I'm trying to bring up the issue of how and where for you all as a policy committee to think about where we can incorporate or consider restorative practices
Into policy.
into policy.
Yep.
Got it, so.
I mean,
Don't we have it in our strategic plan? Isn't that a part of our strategic
I
plan?
believe so. yeah.
in there, so
Yeah.
maybe the administration at some point coming in there. I mean, I know I brought it up, and I'm a big supporter on that one.
Yeah,
Um,
I brought it up.
Which
That's why I believe we included it in the strategic plan because of
Exactly.
our
Our discussion on
desire
there. Yeah.
To make sure
to
it's holistic.
focus on that.
Right, and it's there in the strategic plan, and it's something we, like you said, we've all vocalized and talked about, but are we consistently practicing it with fidelity? Does policy help with that? It does in a lot of cases, so right now, we don't have that specifically in policy, so as far as I know. So it's a request to you all to consider, like, how could that be incorporated?
In policy.
In policy, yeah. If and how, or through regulation, but just somewhere where we're ensuring that that is happening consistently for our students.
I would have to research further, but I'm pretty sure it's in procedure. I'm pretty sure that's something that we've worked with our principals on. But I can research further.
Okay.
Something I came across when I was trying to prepare for one of our previous meetings was there is a mismatch between what JFCF says. You have a student who may be determined to have brought controlled substance may be expelled. But then in JGDZ, JGEZ, in Part 7, it says drug offenses, which gets into code section, school board shall expel from school attendance any student who is determined to brought a substance or imitation controlled substance, et cetera. So we have one policy that says that we may, which gives more leeway, and then another policy, which presumably if there's a Z in here, if I'm understanding how this works.
Local.
We've written it ourselves. We said that we shall expel. So, and in practice, I've seen that we're more on the may than on the shall. And I think we've got two policies that are working in opposition to each other. And I think that was some of the confusion I had, I believe, at our last meeting, where I was trying to understand the difference here, and I wasn't understanding why we were operating in a may situation rather than a shall.
So the policies as well, so JGEZ is not a fully local policy. There is a JGE through VSBA. The Z is because we've added something somewhere there.
Okay.
So it all go through, and I'll look at the current VSBA template with our policy to see where that language changes, and sometimes it's the fact where, because VSBA will look at policies, within the 5-year limit as well, and one policy might have caught up with that while the other hasn't yet. So I'll double check everything and
Thank you, yeah.
verify that.
The dates at the bottom, too.
Yeah, I'll look at those.
Yeah, the implementation dates.
And with that said, if the business meeting, can we know about those corrections or anything before we vote on those policies? If you're gonna,
You're gonna-
shall,
To have
Time,
in terms
okay.
of meeting with
So we
the
just
so
put
if
those
that's
out of the-
pulled, okay, gotcha. All right, that makes sense.
What was the second policy? I didn't get that. Is it JGEZ?
Yeah, it's a dash, JGDZ dash JGEZ.
Sound like a rap name.
It has a mouse.
Yeah. We'll research that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions around policies?
So just for clarity on that one, we're pulling the ones that we just mentioned, and then everything else is going on consent, right?
I heard that we're going to vote on the one, and then
We were
develop
going
a regulation around JFCF.
And then everything else that's in the packet, we're going to put into consent.
And
The
we're also
ones that
going to,
don't have a second reading.
with
That don't have a
JHCL
second
around the
reading.
lactation piece, that we were going to
Right.
make changes to
Uh-huh.
that because we
I'm
had
lost.
board consensus
Yeah.
around that. And I think
Correct.
that's an easy change that we can
Correct.
have ready for the next board meeting.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now I'm confused. Are there any specific ones that we've requested that we pull from consent at this point?
Initially, there was a request for us to pull it and then review it with policy review, but then we heard from Mr. Cloud who said, go ahead and adopt it, and then we can develop regulations around that policy.
Yeah.
That's why I brought it up, so we can come back later.
And some of these aren't for the May meeting, but for the June meeting, because
Yeah,
they have
so
a
we got
second
first and
reading.
I
second.
think there's one that had a second reading on it.
Yeah. I think there's a couple
Was there two, maybe?
of them. Yeah.
Ms. Buffalo?
I think.
Mr. Jordan's had it.
Yeah.
hand up.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I hope these are real quick. I just have first a question on policy EEAB, the school bus scheduling and routing. Um, and I guess as I read it and it describes pedestrian vehicular and pedestrian traffic control plan for each school is reviewed annually. And then there's in the first paragraph, it also reference reports that are done and could be provided at the request of the school board. I just wanted to raise. I'm not sure I've ever seen that in terms of the actual reports, but in the context of the discussions that we're having around zoning and uh, potentially school closures and so forth, I just wanted to raise this as an opportunity, perhaps, of us to include one of these annual reports as part of that process as we talk about who walks to school, where traffic guards are, where the safety plans are. I hear from parents and others often around bus bus stops and walking paths. And so since this policy is up there, I just wanted to put it out there for consideration in the future for us to take advantage of this policy to include it as part of our review of school zoning and closure and other educational planning work that we're doing. The second one I had
That's him.
is let's see.
What's the deal?
Oh, JFG, the search and seizure. Uh, can someone just kind of just explain what's being dealt with here? I know I see where we've stricken something from a regulation, but from a big picture perspective, what actually is being addressed here?
I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan, about the actual policy or the change in the policy?
Yes. Well, more so the change, but in context of the policy.
So the only reason
What?
for the change is taking off the regulation because VSBA doesn't track regulations and they're no longer cross-referenced, but we still have the regulation in place.
Yeah. So I guess just not specific to this, but I know I'm listening and I actually made a note because we continue to have these conversations about VSBA and Z policies and what they track and what they don't track. My understanding still remains that, VSBA is just providing us with model policies for us to consider. And sometimes I think we describe it as though, we've got a VSBA recommendation, which we are free to adopt. Then we start having conversations around Z policies because we deviate from what VSBA recommends. And I still think, to me, these are just policies. And when we adopt them, they have nomenclature. And I think if we're going to have a Z policy, that would really indicate something that we've originated versus just modifying a recommendation that we're receiving. But I just leave that out there. But for the sake of time, I don't want to go through that. But thank you for clarifying that one. And then my last one is on IKH, retaking SOL assessments. Whole lot of red there. Can you just kind of explain what the end result is achieving?
Absolutely, Mr. Jordan. And sorry, this is taking me a second here to pull it up for you. This policy, similar to the verified credits policy that we're changing to a non-Z policy. The reason these changes are being made is because this policy goes into high levels of detail about what constitutes a retake for a student to be able to retake a test or to expedite to take a test. couple of years ago, there were a lot of changes at the VDOE, even about allowing students to take tests. So if students have a verified credit in math in high school from Algebra 1, they are not allowed to take the geometry test or the Algebra 2 test. If they have their earth science or their biology test, successful verified credit, they're not allowed to take chemistry or another science test. And then these also have specific rules around what you have to do for the federal accountability and for state accountability and for, what score ranges you can retake a test. Basically, all of that was deleted to say, you follow the state rules. That basically, it's what's determined by the Board of Education, because that way, when those state rules change, which we get notified of right away, we change our procedures to follow the state rules. So instead of having to change policy frequently if there's a change in assessment practices, this policy now just says, as determined by the Board of Education is what we have to follow.
Thank you. I thought that was probably the case, and I appreciate you all doing that, because I remember all those discussions from before, but I just wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, we're just doing what you described, simplifying it and making it easier to make adjustments without a whole lot of paperwork. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Stone?
I'm so sorry to be contrary, but I don't think I would be comfortable putting this on putting the JFCF on consent agenda for myself until I have clarity on the JGDZ situation, since there is conflicting language. And in JFCF, it says, in accordance with policy JGDZ. So they are referencing each other. So I don't think I can say whether that's appropriate or not until I have clarification.
Well, we can pull this from the May 15th, and we'll take a look. I can tell you that a lot of those conflicts are in the Virginia Code itself. And so the language, in many cases, the General Assembly has said something like, you shall expel, but then in the body of the statute, they put language that makes it clear that you are not required to expel necessarily.
Which
and some of the confusion may be coming from something like that. But we'll take a look at it.
And I think it at least gives a chance for the board to decide what guidelines we want to put if we have conflicting, I'll call it opportunity, then we can at least decide where we land as a board and how we want to direct the administration through this policy and be sure that we're all in alignment for what we expect, rather than if the policies themselves are conflicting, then we're not giving a clear direction to the administration.
I'll work with Dr. Pohl on that.
Thank you.
So am I hearing those are asking for those two to be pulled for May 15th?
It would only be JFCF.
Okay.
JGDZ is not on there.
Okay.
It's just
And I
they
made a
reference
note
each
of
other.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Policy. Sounds good.
All
We'll
right.
do that. There any other questions around policy? Well, thank you, Dr. Pohl.
My pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
very, very much. Thank everyone. See everyone at our business meeting, and please drive home safely, and this meeting is adjourned.